The story begins with the main character Tenno Sho, a 35-year-old man who finds himself in a strange place and does not understand where he is. His thoughts return to the last thing he remembers. That morning he woke up with a fog in his head after oversleeping, but still went to work. Later on the way home, his family asked him to buy yogurt. When he was crossing the road to return, a truck suddenly ran him over. He soon learned that others were also hit by the same truck. There was something different about him. While others shone, he did not shine. Tenno wondered what to do next. Then a voice was heard saying that if nothing was done, everything would fail. The challenge was incomplete, and he could return them all to their native world. 10 such thoughts flashed by, and he recalled stories about brave heroes and imagined that primordial world. And he wondered if these were the same characters from the comics his sister admired. When he tried to figure out the situation, he noticed that he was alone. The others had disappeared. But the voice seemed to suggest that they had found something important. To his surprise, there was still one more person there. He wondered why no one had noticed him. Listening to the voices, he guessed that he was not supposed to be here, even though he was with 4 other people. The voice said that the idea of the summoning was bad because it disturbed the balance of the world. But they still decided to use the summoning skills. Tenno was confused and did not understand what was happening. Suddenly he felt as if he was falling. He woke up under a tree, looked around, and still did not know where he was. His body felt sluggish and heavy, as if he had no strength left. Struggling to get up, he looked around and realized that he was in a forest. He thought about how to get rid of his sluggishness. The forest was dark and gloomy, as if everything around was closing in and pressing on him. Soon he realized that this was the otherworld, as he had heard before. Somehow he was drawn into the ritual of summoning a hero. He thought about how his sister loved those comics about heroes who were summoned to another world. She always told him about them, but he never thought they were real. He began to doubt whether he had really ended up in another world and whether there was a way to return home. Irritated, he shouted loudly. Then he stopped and calmed down. He knew he needed to think clearly and decide what to do next. According to his sister, he assumed that magic and demons could exist in this world. He suddenly realized that he had just shouted so loudly. But when he looked back, there was no one who could hear him. As he walked further, he muttered to himself that everything seemed eerie and he felt uneasy. Since he woke up, something had been clinging to his body, and it seemed as if it was slowly crawling into him. He thought about asking someone for help, but there were only trees all around up to the horizon. The longer he stayed there, the worse he felt. Since he woke up, he had never felt so bad in his life. No matter how he looked, the forest was surrounded by darkness, and maybe it was some kind of curse that made him so tired. Maybe it was an evil spirit or something else. He was not sure, but it was the only explanation he could come up with. The black mist around him seemed to swirl in the air, and he thought about a cleansing spell and about evil demons. He looked around and did not know what he was even doing. He behaved like an idiot. He did not even know if magic and spirits really existed. But something was wrong. He felt it, and you noticed that his body was slowly recovering. He looked around once more, raised his hand, and tried a cleansing spell. To his surprise, the black fog began to dissipate. 10:10, stop. He wondered if the evil spirit was really coming at him, and finally realized that in this world magic could really be used. He thought that sometimes it is not so bad to escape from reality. Suddenly a wolf appeared, growling and slowly sneaking up. At first it was shocked and did not quite understand if it was a dog. But then he realized that it was definitely a wolf. He wondered what to do. It would be reckless to fight it. Probably he just needed to slowly walk away. The wolf kept approaching, and Tina was sure that if he ran, the wolf would catch him. Watching, he noticed that the wolf's paws were trembling. As if he was the prey here, he knew he had to get out of there. The wolf lunged as if attacking, but it was not so. Suddenly it fell, howling in pain. Tina wondered if it was suffering from the same black mist he had encountered earlier. Fear rose, but the animal lover's instinct prevailed, and he realized he had to try to save the wolf. Remembering how the cleansing magic had worked on him earlier, he decided to try it on the wolf. To his surprise, the wolf growled at him, but he decided to try. He raised his hand and applied the cleansing magic. It worked. The wolf recovered right before his eyes. Tenno felt a surge of tenderness. The wolf, which had previously been frightening, now seemed almost cute. Despite its size, it looked cooler and scarier, and he even wanted to pet its fur. The wolf began moving toward him, and Tenno noticed that its fur was dirty, because he was from Japan, where cleanliness is valued. Instinctively, he thought the wolf needed a bit of cleaning and wondered if magic could help. He chanted a cleansing spell and imagined the wolf completely clean. After a moment, the wolf stretched out and refreshed itself. It looked at him, and Tenno was surprised to see that it was already leaving, and he muttered to himself. But then, to his surprise, the wolf began running alongside him, keeping pace. Tenno Marvel felt how fast it was. It seemed the wolf sensed that he was not an ordinary person. Heron, 200 years ago, the forest was engulfed by darkness. An event difficult to accomplish by ordinary means, but people somehow did it. The darkness spread and engulfed the forest. And the weak were sifted out, only the strong remained. The wolf Tenno met turned out to be King Fenrir, and for 2 centuries he watched over the forest and witnessed many deaths. His magic was strong enough to resist the darkness for some time. The cleansing magic he used to drive away the darkness was only a temporary solution. Casting spells exhausted his magic. Constant repetition of them quickly drained his power. He did this for years and spent almost all his magic. Fenrir realized that at this pace he would soon not survive. But as his strength weakened, he felt the presence of people and therefore decided to exterminate each of them before death. Sensing the smell of a person nearby, he rushed forward to attack, aiming to kill. It was then that he met Tenno. Fenrir froze, irritation boiled within him. He could not believe it. He did not expect to be so weak, yet he found himself on the brink of collapse. Fenrir noticed that Tina was trying to give him a sign to stay away. He thought that the darkness was engulfing him, and he could not yet afford to lose consciousness. He felt unbearable disappointment, but then he fainted. Tenon will see Fenrir fall, run up to him, and use cleansing magic on him. Fenrir realized that although the effect was only temporary, it seemed the magic worked better than you expected. There were no visible wounds, and he was amazed by the overwhelming magical power that Tenno possessed. It passed through Fenrir's whole body and healed him. Never before have I seen such precise and boundless magic. For the first time, he felt that he had made a man his master, and it was strange that Fenrir did not feel resistance when showing his submission. The scene changed. Tenno and Fenrir ran together. Tenno felt invigorated, and the air seemed lighter. Magic revived him and the wolves. They stopped near the cave, the entrance of which is shrouded in black mist. Fen turned to him as if asking whether he wanted to enter. Tendon cautiously approached the cave and muttered that it was suspicious and gave him a bad feeling. It was better for him not to go inside. But when Fenrir approached, Tenno laughed and said he was just joking. With the help of resolve, Tenno used cleansing magic in the cave on. Trying to dispel the black mist, he reached out and touched the entrance, but the curse did not disappear. He wondered how truly large this place was and what was inside, when Ten found himself in the cave, saw several pairs of glowing eyes looking at him, and assumed that Fenrir and other wolves might live here. Several wolves growled and roared, but Fenrir stopped them with his commanding posture. Tenno quickly realized that all the wolves were cursed and decided to help them with his cleansing magic. But when he did this, he noticed the lifeless bodies of other wolves who had not survived. He knew that somehow he had to deal with this. The curse this time fades more clearly. He focuses all his energy on the magic and again utters the cleansing spell. To his relief, the curse was lifted from the wolves and they were cleansed. Among them, he noticed one dog. They were all dirty and stained with the curse. Their eyes were sad. He did not know if they understood what he was trying to do. Again cast a cleansing spell on them, and when the magic washed over them, the wolves and the dog were freed from the curse. Tina realized that they were all friends, bound by shared pain. The 10 of us stood with a sense of accomplishment and wondered what to do next. He looked ahead and saw 2 passages leading further into the cave. He turned to Fenrir and asked if he knew what was along those paths. Fenrir shook his head, showing he had no idea. Tina realized that the wolves understood his language, and for the first time wondered if he could really rely on them as guides. As they went deeper into the cave, he felt the darkness growing thicker, the curse seeming to intensify, and he was sure there was a reason for it. He tried the cleansing magic a few more times, but the curse seemed endless, like a power that would never fade. Looking back at the wolves, he saw they were still struggling, and the curse still affected them despite his efforts. He realized he had to quickly come up with a way to protect them, and the idea of creating a barrier came to mind. But he also knew that it would be difficult. He had to act quickly before the curse consumed them. Then he tried to create a barrier around all of them. He said it seemed to have worked, and doubted whether the barrier would be effective against physical attacks. Still not knowing what was outside, he thought that maybe it was worth strengthening the barrier so that it could withstand both physical and magical attacks. It was worth trying. He tried, but Fenrir just looked at him. The 10 explained that he had just strengthened the barrier, so they should be safe. Inside, Dicky realized that the letter K was much larger than he expected. He could do something with his magic in this situation. He thought about night vision or clairvoyance, but neither seemed useful, and he did not know which image to focus on. However, he soon realized that it was only a matter of recognizing the shape of the surrounding space, and he was using night vision and spatial awareness, which seemed. It was extremely real. Although it was only in his imagination, he said he would cleanse every inch of this area, and began to use his cleansing magic. He did not stop there, and additionally reinforced the barrier around the space. When he looked at the wolves who were all looking forward, he noticed. To the giant boulder, suddenly, something on it began to glow brightly. He wondered if something had hit the barrier. The defender who was defending asked if there was any curse on the boulder. Fenrir looked completely empty, and Tenem realized there was no immediate answer. He slowly approached the boulder and felt increasing unease. After some time, he looked at Fenrir's aggressive expression and wondered if the stone was alive, because its behavior reminded him of their first meeting. Then he decided to apply cleansing to the rock. He wondered if he should imagine the cleansing stone more strongly. He imagined it until it completely disappeared, as he had seen in movies and advertisements, but he knew that with a stubborn stone it would not work that way, so he tried to imagine something durable that would not chip off easily, and slowly chipped it piece by piece until it disappeared forever. After work, he cast a cleansing spell on the stone, and the stone gradually disappeared. To his surprise, he found a bird lying there. The bird slowly took off, flapping its wings and purred. It touched his hand, but it was covered in blood. He believed that wound regeneration was different from healing damaged cells and from closing the wound. So he first applied a healing spell, and then cleansing magic on the bird. Soon the little bird seemed fully healed and looked good, but its size remained unfortunate. The bird pecked Tenno on the hand, and it was clear that it still hurt. He apologized, gently running his hand over the bird. Tenno was glad that he could rest a little when he sat down. It seemed strange to him, but the battle seemed to glow in his head. He realized that there was still much he did not understand. He decided to strengthen the barrier, and when he looked outside, he noticed a black shadow, resembling a tattoo, trying to sneak through the barrier. The barrier, in turn, attacked the shadow and forced it to retreat. The 10 looked around, thought about magic, but decided to postpone it for now. He was somewhat reassured by the strength of the barrier, but one thing still troubled him. It seemed they were not improving. Lance de Fenrir looked tired, and Tino noticed that, in his opinion, Fenrir had not eaten anything since their arrival and might have been too busy with something else. 10 of them were also sitting there, not knowing what to do. At that moment, he was most worried about finding a safe place to sleep and getting food and water. He knew he had to focus on the most important things to survive and reminded himself not to do anything stupid that could kill him. The cave seemed to be one of the best places to rest. If he could clear the whole cave, he could sleep peacefully. But to do this, he needed to find out what a black shadow was. The way it reacted to the barrier suggested that its source was outside the cave. He also felt uneasy every time he noticed the presence of a shadow, so he knew he had to do something about it. He paused for a moment and realized that he could not clean it until he found out what it was. But before that, he needed to better examine the entire cave. He decided to check if he could do it with the magic he used before the emergence of spatial consciousness and tried to apply it. The shadows were so thick that it was hard to see anything through them, but he felt that there was another space in the cave. It seemed he could see only inside the barrier, and beyond its limits he could not discern anything. He thought that something like farsightedness or clairvoyance might work. He needed magic that would allow him to see the cave from a different angle. Something like a drone or a video camera. I remembered how pleasant it was to watch on TV an aerial shot of the sunset, filmed by a drone. This image was imprinted on him, and inspired by the idea, he decided to try clairvoyance. A screen appeared before him, which frightened him, but it worked. Through the screen, he saw a huge rocky mountain, but the entrance was surprisingly small. He focused on cleansing the place, imagining that he could encompass the entire space. He was not sure if the curse could be lifted, but he assumed that cleansing the shadow might return the curse to its source. With that, he used cleansing magic and strengthened the barrier on it. While he was doing this, wolves walked around him and watched closely. He felt as if something was coming out of his body and thought it might be magic. The black curse seemed to retreat from the plants, and everything began to seem perfect and free of curses. But after an hour, he noticed that the shadow had returned. He looked closely to see where it was coming from and noticed that it was growing from the ground. It was extremely irritating, and he knew he would have to cleanse it again. This time the curse seemed wider and deeper, so he decided to cover the ground with a barrier. Driving the curse back to the source, he continued to cleanse the land. After some time, he sat down, feeling mentally exhausted but physically not tired. He realized he was trembling, did not know what to do next, and really wanted to return home. Fenrir approached and sat beside him, and Tenno gently stroked his fur and wondered if this was really a wild animal. Surprisingly, this calmed him. He thought that no matter how much he pondered and how pessimistic he felt, he had to move forward. Although Fenrir's body weight was heavy, it gave him some relief. Later that night, the scene shifted to a distant castle. A stone steamed over a strange magical circle, and something unusual caught the attention of the man nearby. The man approached the king and reported that something unusual was happening in the forest. People saw a white light coming from the center of the forest, the vigilant man. This was the last struggle of the forest king before his death, and then ordered the man to sacrifice more blood for the magical stone. The man agreed to carry out the order. The king announced that they had almost taken control of the forest, the center of the world. Once those beasts in the forest had a strong king, but that is a long-forgotten story. The time has come for them all to die and be honored. Lives devoted to the emperor for such a great cause. Once the king asked the man what was wrong with the forest. In the last few decades, nothing had changed in the forest, and the king did not know what was happening. The kingdom of Ivolus cast a complex magical spell of the magical eye over the entire forest, and many sacred beasts disappeared, while demons began to appear at the same time. The man said that in the last 200 years, no country dared to fight the envelopes, and because of this some states around the forest completely disappeared. He added that this might be true, and that the kingdom of Invades sacrificed hundreds of thousands of lives for its evil mages. He expressed concern that they would be powerless. Although he did not want to admit it, he knew that soon humans would dominate the world. They left, muttering that the kingdom of Inveli would eventually disappear, like the others. He hoped that the god of creation would help them. Meanwhile, Tina woke up and stretched. He felt relief and joy when he lifted his head and saw the blue sky. He then looked at Fenrir and thought that when Tino finished the cleansing, Fenrir would probably leave. He had a good time. He asked Fenrir if he was ready to stay with him. Understanding Fenrir's reaction, Tenno wonders whether to give him a name. He remembered that during their first meeting, the first thing he noticed was Fenrir's white and silver fur, so he decided to name him Ko. There were 2 more wolves of the same color, so he named the female So and the male Gio. There was also a black wolf, whom he named Kuru, and the last white wolf he named Shan, and it seemed a bit strange to him to name so many wolves, but there was also a dog in the group, whom he named Chai. He looked at the bird, admired the smooth transition of colors in its feathers and its beautiful song, and decided to name it Karen. He praised himself for his skill in naming things well. For a moment, he felt he almost remembered something important, but quickly dismissed it, realizing it didn't matter. He told himself it was time to focus on the current reality. Meanwhile, Fenrir was embarrassed, clearly surprised that he had been given a name. One of the wolves asked him what the human head said. Ko replied that Tenno gave them all names. And if not for him, their Fenrir race would have been destroyed. He added that he had extraordinarily great magical and healing powers. Remaining close to him, they would benefit because Tenno restored his magical powers. So they had to obey him as their lord. He turned the chair and asked what he thought. Shur said that everyone treated him well, so there was no reason not to follow his orders. They added that with the power their lord gave them, they would do everything possible to serve him. 10 of them asked if he knew about any sources of water. When everyone looked at him, he explained that he was asking about a place where water could be found. Kuro and Shin went ahead to guide him. Tenno asked them to wait for him and began to catch up with them. He noticed that although they had passed the barrier, they were still moving forward. When they reached the water, Tina looked at it and saw that it was dirty. He doubted whether it could even be called water. When he looked at Kuro and Cheyenne, they felt calm about it. He noted that even if he purified it, it still seemed strange. He gently patted Kuro and Shin on the heads, showing his gratitude. Tana understood that he could not purify the water until he recovered. Then they began to move away from the water, and he said that its use was hardly possible. It would be good if they had access to spring water inside the barrier, or, even better, to clean water from Japan. He looked at his hand and, thinking about the water, suddenly saw it in his palm. Tenno was amazed that water appeared on his palm when he imagined it, and the magic was truly impressive. He wondered if he could create something he wanted to eat. Then he asked to make judon with a soft-boiled egg, extra sauce, and extra red ginger. But nothing appeared. He sighed and said that it was impossible with cooked food. He tried to ask for cabbage, but still nothing came out. Then he tried to ask for chicken meat and fire, but the result was the same. He realized that he probably could not create what did not exist in this world, so he decided to look for food nearby. He looked at the mountain and thought that if he was going to use the rocky mountain as a base, he needed to ensure the security of the surrounding area. It would be great if the trees around gave nuts or fruits. He saw a few mushrooms, but did not dare to touch them and decided to move away. He examined the tree branches and noticed that there were no flowers, no fruits, no nuts, only trees. If he found nothing, he feared he would die of hunger. Suddenly you appeared from behind, followed by Ko, who seemed angry at them. After that, Hio, Kuru, and Cheyenne ran, and Tenno wondered where they were going. Tenno looked at Ku, not understanding his quiet growl, as if the wolf wanted to say something. Although he answered so calmly, Tenno still could not fully understand what he meant, and then realized that he was probably worried too. He reached out his hand to gently stroke him, and calmed him by saying that they would all return soon. Let's continue looking for food. Goodbye. Deep down, Tenet doubted whether they would really return. He said aloud that there was nothing good around, only trees and… By that time, he was already hungry. He thought that if he didn't find nuts or fruits in this world, he didn't know what he would do. Suddenly, he noticed a new cave. Remember that the cave he had been in since that morning was hard to reach and located on a high rocky ledge. However, this new cave seemed like a much better place to live, although he knew he couldn't approach it carelessly. He decided to inspect the cave, relying on his sense of space. He found that it was quite wide and had a passage upwards leading to 3 floors. There was also plenty of space underground. He felt a surge of excitement at the thought of exploring it. Just as he was imagining various options, the sound of wolves returning reached his ears, and Tenno smiled, relieved that they had come back. To his surprise, they brought with them the corpse of a giant animal. Surprised, Tenno asked everyone to bring it to him. They all looked at him with admiration, and Tenno could not help but feel sad. The large animal they brought was clearly intended for his food. He was not as enthusiastic about this food as they were, but he knew he had no choice. He had to eat it. He embraced 3 walls, happy and grateful. Then he wondered who would butcher the carcass. He decided that, first of all, he should clean every corner and crevice of the meat. Imagining a vacuum cleaner in his mind, he applied cleaning and thoroughly cleaned the beast. Focusing on the filth and impurities, he persistently sent curses back to the source. After everything was cleaned up, the meat finally seemed ready to eat and even looked tasty. Tenno assumed it was a wild boar, but was not completely sure. Maybe it was some kind of monster. Then he looked at Ko and thought that Wolf Ai was like a monster. When Ko began approaching the wild boar, Tenon often found him cute and funny. He thought that, considering the state of the opening, Komide could bite into him. However, Tenon knew that if no one else took him apart, he would have to do it himself. He looked at the walls and told them not to stare at him for so long. Let's start eating. He wondered how to cut the meat and if there was a way to preserve it so it wouldn't spoil. He came up with how to cool it, imagining the chill from the luxurious refrigerator he bought on payday and applied cooling magic to it. After that, he felt satisfaction, but then realized he needed to train the blood. However, he felt a bit uncertain, considering it completely foolish, and wondered if magic could help him with this. He thought that blood was like water and decided to drain it. But quickly dismissed this idea, knowing it would simply dry up. He touched the boar's body, focusing on its internal organs. Imagining what was inside, he felt a wave of nausea. Ko wondered what Lore was doing. Chase guessed that maybe something displeased him. Heya said it was probably when Boar was still warm. Everyone looked at him with disappointment, and Tenna pondered the blood vessels and internal organs, thinking about how to get rid of them all. At first, they decided to simply remove the blood vessels and cauterize them, because it seemed sufficient. Ko told the others that unlike them, Tenema had no claws or tusks, so it would be difficult for him to eat. They all agreed that if they were also given a joint order, they would cut everything. Tenno used instant movement. When something appeared from the upper part of the boar's body, the wolves looked excited. But suddenly Ten burned the material, shocking everyone. He removed the ashes, and everyone looked at him with disappointed faces. Tenup said he would clean it with magic and remove the unpleasant smell from the meat. Previously cut fish, but such an animal had many internal organs, such as liver, kidneys, brain, and eyes. He could not help but imagine them. He used instant teleportation again. To extract the liver, the wolves got excited and approached by the smell. Then Tenno burned the liver and it shocked everyone, he thought. It turned out well, and he decided that next time he would close his eyes during the procedure. He could cool and burn things when he tried, and when it came to natural phenomena, he could also use magic. Tenno told the wolves that he would remove the rest of the entrails and asked for some space, and when he saw their disappointed faces, he asked what had happened. He cut the carcass of the wild boar with wind magic, but then he realized that he had forgotten to remove the fur. He took some meat for himself and allowed the wolves to take some too. Call those who brought this first so they can take their share. She asked Ko if he could also eat a little. Ko agreed and said that everyone needed to move on before the bountiful forest returned. Frankly speaking, to put it simply, they all shared the same small fate. Chi noted that the shared confidence contained much wisdom. Coven asked if Chi had forgotten that he was also the king of the terrible wolves. Chi replied that he was not a king, but a worthless leader who could not even protect his friends. Ko encouraged him, saying that the child would find him safe. He then began to eat meat, hinting that since they were given such long and important names, they should also call each other by those names. 10 Caves howled when he set all the meat on fire and told Ko that he wanted a little more. He took the extract, put it on the stone, and said it was tasteless because it had turned to coal like the meat before. He decided not to rush and to heat it with infrared radiation, and slowly began to cook it. When the wolves ate raw meat, they started to smell the cooked meat and looked at Tenno. Tennom caught their gaze and smiled, realizing he had made the right choice by putting it on the stone, which had now turned a nice brown color. He lifted the stone, stabbed the meat with it, and found that it was very hard and slightly burnt. After that, he began to eat, teasing that he was not going to share it. Nearby, something strange was happening on the stone. He entered the cave with the wolves and thought that first he needed to inspect it to make it a base. The space between the outer wall and the inner part of the cave looked normal. Inside, there were no signs of life. Decided that because of the high ceiling, the first floor would be the main room, and thought to combine it with the place where he was yesterday, which would give him Forstura Mansion. The first level was an underground lair, large and with a high ceiling. He noticed that the space seemed to stretch far inward. He was curious about what was flickering on the back wall, but found no signs of life there. The floor seemed sturdy, so the real concern was what was beneath it. Then he used his spatial sense again and confirmed that there really was something below. He even wondered how long the barrier he created yesterday would hold. He realized that he soon needed to better understand magic. At first, deciding to check below, he hugged Ko and said he did not want to go down. He spoke kindly to him, and he replied that he now felt better and was ready. Down, as they descended, the Tenno discovered a large amount of shadow curse in this area. Together they felt something and began to glow in its direction. The curse seemed to be looming over him, so Tina hurried to use cleansing magic. To his surprise, the barrier he had set earlier reacted, which he did not expect, and he thought the cleansing might not have worked. The curse gradually disappeared. Tenet pondered their success and why there was nothing around. The curse reminded him of what had previously surrounded Karen, and he thought there might be something more in it. Then he saw a spider that confused him because it had wings. He decided to ignore it for now and focused on fighting the black curse, using. Cleansing was happening on him while the curse continued to fade. The spider was watching them. Tenon noticed it seemed to be emerging from the ground, so he knew he had to cleanse it properly. When he looked closer, he saw the main spider and 20 smaller ones. He looked at them more carefully and noticed that there were insects in the world too. He assumed these could be monster variants. People often said that spiders are useful animals. But he paused a bit because it had wings. It was not quite an ordinary spider. Ko looked closer and noted that it was impressive how long it had lasted. Suddenly the main spider was blown away and landed on Tino's hair. Smaller spiders crawled onto Kai and caused him trouble. Tino realized that they seemed not too harmful and said so. That the second level of the cave was also spacious, so they should later inspect the blocks and cracks. He remembered that earlier he had only shouted the cleansing spell, and although he had no clear image in his head, the magic still worked. He recalled how his sister said that for spellcasting it is important to have an imaginary image, but here it could be different. He decided to try something else, and instead of imagining, simply said fire. Nothing happened. He did not understand why nothing happens without a clear image in the head. Then he tried again, this time with water, and noticed a little liquid in your purchase. He imagined fire and repeated the words again. And this time the magic worked. The fire scared the wolves. He realized that magic worked when he imagined it, but did not know what the difference was when he did not imagine it. He then tried to imagine water while saying the word fire, and fire appeared again. He was not sure if a clear mental image was needed to use the new magic. When he stepped forward, he noticed that the magic seemed to move with him. He thought that if the word was already linked to magic, it gained priority and would always be associated with that image. It seemed convenient, but he was not sure about it. While he was thinking about this, he noticed a crack in the cave wall and realized who was sneaking through it. He touched the gap, thinking there might be space inside, but there was no curse, and he saw nothing inside. He wondered if Blake could help, like a ball of light. Created it, it was so bright that Coast squinted and felt pressure in his eyes. Tenon apologized for this. Then he tried to reduce the light, but it was difficult for him to precisely adjust the magic. He asked the wolves if they were all worried. Then he tried to look into the crack and said he saw shiny stones. He wondered what it could be, and just then the spider's head pushed inside and brought a small piece of stone. Tenor realized it was silverstone, a good material. He called the spider leader and thanked him for the gift. He then realized that calling the spider leader was the right thing to do. For some reason, the wolves were looking at the stone, and Tenet wondered if it was rare. It was really beautiful, but he did not have an immediate need for it. He carefully put the mithril into his jacket. Moving forward, Tenno said that there might also be shiny things on other floors, but that did not matter now. Shine told Kuru that Tenno was calm when he saw the mithril. Kuru began to doubt whether Tenno was even human. Then he thought that there were no more cracks or crevices to explore, and now the conquest of the Rocky Mountain was complete. He had not yet checked the bag and found a few things in it, although he did not think anything would be needed. When he looked aside, his smartphone was taken away. After securing the base, Tenno planned to survey the surroundings for people, but he also wanted to fortify the place so that at least it would be comfortable to sleep. Sitting with the company, he justified that at least something should be put on the floor because it hurt him to sit on it. He wondered if there was something soft and smooth that he could use. Suddenly the floor changed, and you asked yourself if it had been leveled. They looked at him in surprise, and he wondered what they were thinking. Despite this change, the place became more comfortable, and he was able to smooth the surface of the stone. The entire surface was now well maintained, and the wolves said how amazing it was, while Coast noted that it was hard to believe. Those solid rocks were now filled with magical power. As expected from their lord, he added that since he arrived there first, he would take on the leadership. But suddenly, everyone began slipping on the surface. Tina was surprised and thought that honing magic was difficult. Ko stayed on his feet and thought that if he had fallen there, he would have looked ridiculous. Lightning illuminated the night sky, their powerful discharges striking the barrier created by Tenno. Only the Spider Chief noticed this, and the spider recalled his past when he carried hellish fires and lived deep underground. There he dragged every prey that wandered into the lava, and because of this others feared him. The days when his existence seemed doomed to death, for he was Turnia, the keeper of death. Previously the spider was huge, but now he had shrunk, and he stopped thinking about how small he had become. It seemed as if he had spent all his magic to protect the children, and somehow they survived, perhaps by luck, perhaps because of his sacrifice. It was unclear how such a powerful miasma could have disappeared. Ko called him by his real name. When the spider responded, he pondered aloud whether the way Ko perceived him was real or just imaginary. His body became so fragile that even a gust of wind could blow him away, and he waved off Ko's, saying it was none of his business. Instead, he asked how everything happened. The power smelled of magic again, as it once did, and then he asked about the dark magical power. But he hesitated to mention Tenno. Ko said he understood what the spider meant, but they were also saved by the power of Tenno. She dismissed it, insisted it was impossible, and claimed that the forest was polluted by humans. Ko did not agree, explaining that the quality of Tenno's magic was completely different. That is why they revered him as their master. The spider wondered if Fenrir's was proud. Together they answered that they bore no grudge against the spider's family. However, he warned that if the spider turned against their lord, it would be a disaster. The spider sneered and said he would never do something so terrible. No matter how you looked at it, 10 of them had several hundred times more magic than each of them at full strength. The spider noticed that he felt Tenno's magic gently penetrating, and quickly restoring the forest. Ko reassured him that as long as there was no hostility, everything would be fine, because he did not want fewer kings in their forest, and the spider asked why Ko thought he would lose. Calculating together, he put jokes aside and asked him to tell the children to stop teasing Chai. The spider realized that his children were actually not teasing him. Ko explained that since they had moved away from him and gathered around Chai, the latter had become very frightened. The spider then asked who Chai was, and Ko replied that their master had given Chai his name and even suggested the spider call him Ko. The spider agreed that this was indeed his name and recalled Tenno, who had called him a leader yesterday. Then he inquired about the lightning strike last night, as it released a frightening surge of magical power. No answer, probably it was humans again who launched the attack, but Tenno's barrier stopped it. The chief was surprised and noted that this should be impossible. It seemed Ko hinted that Tenno maintained a barrier covering the entire sky. He believed this would eventually exhaust their magic. Agreeing, he admitted that even in his former state, he could not have held such a barrier, even for a moment. However, their master seemed completely unmoved. Meanwhile, Tenno sat alone and was deeply thoughtful. For several days, he had not seen a single person. Preparing his house, he launched a clairvoyant drone to survey the surroundings, but wherever it flew, there was only endless forest. Although it traveled a great distance, it saw only various animals and noticed no houses or roads. Wherever one looked, there was only wilderness around. He began to wonder if he had ended up in a world without people. The line was cut off, but he reassured himself that there was still hope. There were places he had not yet checked. Meanwhile, the renovation in his house was going smoothly and gradually changing the atmosphere in the home. Since then, after many trials and errors, he managed to make the floors and walls smoother to the touch. He also carved stairs into the rock, laid passages to the upper and lower floors, and in the process became more skillful and learned to move instantly. From the outside, it still looked like an ordinary mountain, but inside the network of stairs led to the very top floor and into a spacious mansion with a 2-story basement. Observing the internal structure of the stone, he wished there was someone nearby who would appreciate his work, but around him were only wolves. Moving instantly, he pondered a new trend. Some animals began competing to see who would eat the entrails of their prey first. This might suggest how some peoples, like the Inuit and other groups, ate raw meat to maximize vitamin intake. Perhaps consuming fresh meat was not so bad after all. However, eating only meat at every meal became tiring, as he expected. He craved fish and would even agree to cursed fish. The monotony of meat food became unbearable, and it was then that he noticed the cow behaving strangely. Worried, he decided to find out what was going on. Soon he noticed that the cursed creatures had returned, and this time they were actively attacking. Even when they were beat, he frowned, not understanding what was happening. After yesterday's strong lightning strike, everything was getting worse and more irritating. He then told them not to worry and took a deep breath. Climbing to the top of the cave, he activated his clairvoyance drone and began scanning the surroundings. He noticed that the entire forest was thinly covered with a long-lasting curse. He also remembered that yesterday he saw a large lake beyond the barrier. If he clears everything by this moment, he will be able to simultaneously expand and strengthen the barrier. Ko watched with interest, trying to understand what he was going to do. Tino wondered if he could reach the lake from his place. He decided to check this first by releasing magic outward, which he was used to during stone extraction. He imagined extending one long, thin thread of magic to the lake. It was farther than he expected, but he was confident he could manage. Releasing immense power, Ko felt the intensity of his magic, and it was becoming stronger and could become dangerous. 10-0 Ven commanded, "Now imagine how you expand this stretched magic everywhere, covering everything up to the lake, so that it closes all the way down to the very bottom of the earth." Using this method, he successfully extended the barrier and cleared the land all the way to the lake. The barrier increased almost tenfold, and he felt his body becoming lighter. Standing on the shore, he said that here one truly feels the infinity. They could not compare to me. Kote nodded in agreement. Tino felt that the corruption in the water mostly came from outside. He assumed it could be tried to filter using the barrier membrane as a filter. He decided to carefully install a 3-layer filtration system. Although it seemed as if something or someone was casting a curse, until the other side stops their attacks, he decided from then on to resolutely send back the accumulated curse every day. Then he placed his hand on Ko and said, "Let's finish this by tomorrow." The scene shifted to a well-protected kingdom. Outside stood a man who said it was another peaceful day. Lost, commander of the 4th Chavoric Order of the Kingdom of Invades, approached and addressed the gamers. Gamers, commander of the 1st Order of Chivalric, took note of Lost's early return. Lo replied that nothing important had appeared this time. Gamer asked if there had been any changes in the forest since then. Lo denied it, but was sure that eventually a monster would appear. However, the kingdom was protected by the powerful barrier of the king, and even if something happened, they would be safe, so Gamer noted that everything should be fine, although he hesitated. Lo noticed that this was not like Gamer's, because he was worried about the strange light from the forest. The gamers nodded and explained that a few days ago a bright light spread from the center of the forest in all directions. Using a magic stone, their king gained the power to suppress the kings of the forest. But in all their years, they had never seen such a great change. The king of the forest was not just a man. A myth, and it was strange that he still retained such power. Lost agreed with this and said that this was why the 4th reconnaissance expedition was expanded, but assured him that everything would be fine. He reminded the Hammers that Invades had been repelling foreign invaders for over 400 years, thanks to the power of the king and the mages. They had to trust the king and fight. He looked outside once more and muttered that the words "Wam is lost" turned out to be true. They had to be vigilant because beyond the barrier magical beasts were becoming stronger. The night had almost passed without battles, and there was no particularly important work. Now Lost was going home to take a hot bath. Gamma. His father apologized for delaying him, then turned his thoughts to the magic stone. And a complex magical ice bell, installed to control what was considered the center of the world, namely the forest, all supported by a single magical stone. They say the stone was found in an ancient ruin, and it emitted a strange magical power, and many mages who tried to study it vainly shed blood. At court, those who controlled the power of the stone initially used it to stop aging, and for hundreds of years maintained their positions of power. The players knew that the story was not entirely true. And although they seemed to age slowly, he did not doubt it, because the stability of the entire kingdom depended on one stone, and he could not help but wonder what kind of mysterious magical stone it was. When Hammer went outside, he noticed a group of elves walking towards him. As they passed by him, he admired the intricate patterns on their backs and thought that he hadn't even noticed how they had already arrived there. To speed them up, the man shouted for them to move faster. Gamers noticed this and said it was strange to see so many slaves walking around, and the man recognized him as the commander of the 1st Quarter Chevrolet, and asked if he had any business with the slave house. Gamer denied this and explained that he was just passing by, and the man replied somewhat relieved that even if Gamer wanted to buy slaves, he would not be able to deliver them because the supplies were almost exhausted. The players were surprised, and the man quickly added that just yesterday about 50 beasts were sacrificed to the magical stone. As their number decreased, they reviewed their actions to solve the problem. Gamer is still processing this, hasn't finished yet, and said he must leave. As the man was walking away, a figure in knight armor with a sword accompanied by another person approached him and said that the commander of the 1st Chivoic Order is rarely seen here. Gamer immediately recognized him, Gembla, the commander of the 5th Night Quarter. He thought that Gamer was the biggest fight fan, even among the troops of the 5th Order, reinforced with magical stones. Gamer never knew how to get along with people like him when trying to make the conversation less awkward. Gamer noticed that his new sword looked impressive. Gamel explained that the king recently gave him the sword, and it resembled a royal blade, a magical weapon that became stronger and sharper the more blood it drank. Gamma wanted to test his new sword on a few slaves and thought to follow the king's example by drinking a lot of their blood. However, Gamma advised moderation. When Gamel left, he told the man who supervised the slaves to find those who looked more attractive, and the man replied that the slaves were specially selected for breeding. To which Gamel mockingly replied that he didn't care. He then ordered the man to behead 2 slaves. To his satisfaction, the sword was extremely sharp. The man fell to the ground in shock. Gamma grumbled that this was getting boring because the slave's crest made them insensitive. The priest who accompanied Gamel insisted that he wait until the sword absorbed energy and explained that a special technique was needed. Gamma impatiently ordered him to proceed with it. Meanwhile, gamers thought that the kingdom was gradually descending into madness. Then the action shifted to Tenno, who was preparing a fishing trap. Although he had to replace the thread with vines, he proudly said that he managed to do it. He swung the trap to show Ko and explained that it was a way to catch fish. Just as Kuru was about to eat a small piece of meat, Tina said it was tasteless. Then he went to the lake, hoping to find fish. When he reached the lake, he was upset because it was cursed. Disappointed, he muttered to himself, although he still hoped and had come all the way here to find it. He conducted a check and confirmed his suspicions. It was bad. The curse in the water was difficult to cleanse. Tenno resolutely created a barrier. Stated that he would temporarily not touch the lake and the river in order to focus on purifying the water. He was looking for a way to purify it, so he passed the river water through membrane barriers, but he needed a way to separate the curse over a larger area. Confused, he could not think of anything. He pondered how the curse seemed to have spread everywhere, as if it had passed through a washing machine centrifuge. When he carelessly ran his hand over her fur, he noticed that her hair had straightened. He thought that static electricity collects dust, so maybe it could also collect the curse in the same way. Interested, he decided to try, and concentrating, raised his hand over the lake, imagining it covering its surface with a layer of static electricity to absorb the curse. To his surprise, it worked, but the surface of the lake was covered with numerous small black spots, remnants of the curse, making the lake even more disgusting. The scene returned to the castle, where priests gathered around a magical stone, and one of the men asked if there were any questions regarding the court marriage. The court mage replied that it was nothing serious. It had happened only the day before. The stone had not suffered any stress nearby, which caused concern. The man noted that he had noticed nothing unusual. The court mage carefully examined the stone and doubted whether it was just his imagination, and after a moment focused on a certain spot on the stone. Meanwhile, by the lake, Tenichad gathered all the energy of the curses into the sky. He proudly announced that he had finally gathered everything. The walls watched in astonishment. Tenno continued and said that, as he promised yesterday, he would try to send back the cursed energy along with the amount he gathered inside the barrier. Instantly, he made it disappear, and the lake became completely clean. He smiled contentedly and said that now it would only remain to wait a little to see if the animals would return. Koto was delighted. Tenno returned to the wolves and said that it was time to go home to work on the interior design. In the castle, the mage called Tenno to look at a scratch on the magic stone. When he did, the stone began to glow brightly. Interested in what was happening, the mage noticed a small crack in the stone. The scene shifted to the main hall, where the king was sitting and his ministers stood in a row. The man finished the day's report, and the bald man next to the king asked for the next one. He noted that nothing important was said and expressed his boredom. He was only interested in the report that the forest and the world were now in his hands. He inquired how the sacrifices for the barrier of magic stones went that day, and whether the forest was on the verge of destruction. He spoke grimly and decisively that he would squeeze all life out of the forest, dry it to dust, and make it the foundation of his world. Soon after, he would completely destroy the dirty beastman country that remained. It was then that the knight rushed in with an urgent message. The man beside the king aloud wondered where this noise was coming from. The knight knelt before the king, trembled, and nervously reported that a crack had appeared in the magic stone. The bald man asked if night had really come and emphasized that the room did not exist. They have the same barrier as the barrier that protects the country. Knight confirmed that the matter was not only about strange barriers. The room flashed with light for a moment, and then a crack appeared in the stone. The king became enraged and ordered the knight to be executed. The players who once created signaled to restrain the knight. Everyone in the room, though silent, had the same thoughts. Everyone knew that criticizing the king's anger would end in a slave's fate. The king, still angry, called Mislast and ordered him to immediately go to the forest and find out the source of the alarm. The scene shifts to the forest, where a large sheet of cardboard was about to fall on them, and they ran to save themselves. After some time it stopped, and he realized that he was working on the house then. Then he remembered how he went home and fried meat, noticing that cooking had become much easier thanks to the store he opened, and although he only fried meat, it was a significant improvement. On the first floor there was a kitchen and dining room, spacious enough for everyone to gather and eat together. He said that cooking while looking at the surrounding greenery was very peaceful. Ho, attracted by the smell, asked Tenno for permission to try some fried meat. Tenon understood and gave him a small piece, saying it was a real delicacy. When he tasted it along with the others, he liked the taste. The others, seeing his reaction, also asked for a piece. Tenwa agreed and was about to give them some when he noticed Chai standing nearby. He called him and asked why he was standing aside and silent. Chi, part of the group, was also supposed to be offered meat. Chi, surprised, was not sure if he could really take some, so Karo reassured him and said that the host acted wisely by sharing, and also added that if Chi wanted more, he could join the next hunt, after which Chi, again surprised, asked if this offer was really for him. He smiled and agreed to join them. Everyone enjoyed the fried meat, and Tenno suggested using 2 grills next time to cook faster. After he took a bath, he felt calm. He completely relaxed and thought about how he managed to heat the water using magic. He noticed that magic is really the best. Until recently, he always relied on pure magic to deal with dirt, but as a Japanese, he could not do without a real bath. Although there was no soup this time, he still managed to get himself in order, but he still desired many things. He put a lot of effort to make everything work and wanted to share the experience with everyone. Although it seemed that everyone had become chubbier lately, he doubted whether they would still fit. Then he did something like a toilet, and he could not hold back his emotions. He missed it so much. He remembered how he used to sneak into the forest to avoid wolves, and how someone once caught up with him and said that going alone was dangerous. When they walked together, Tenno told him not to worry, everything would be fine. He stopped recalling the past because he realized that it would not happen again. When he sat in the bath, he noticed that since he learned he could create stones with magic, he had become very meticulous. They turned out like real ones. Toilet with washlet function and even automatic cleaning made him admire the wonders of magic. He heard a noise and Tenno came to check, but was surprised in the process. Ho came outside with a flushed face, and the others wondered what had happened. He hesitated before recalling the diet, admitting that he accidentally peeked at his master in a defenseless state and feared that now Tenno would hate him. Tenon, as always, suggested installing doors and said he was very satisfied with the toilet he made. In fact, he made one for each floor. While practicing magic, he also inadvertently created something unexpected, silver ore, which was difficult to work with magic. He was surprised that it stretched and wondered how far it could extend, and the chief, observing, said with disbelief that it was hard to believe Tenno was conducting magic through mithril. Tenno continued to stretch it and soon noticed that light passed through it, so it looked more like glass. He sat down and thought it looked good even after he made it quite thin. Interested, he decided to try inserting the material into several rocky windows. Eventually, he opened wide windows on each floor. He thought he might still need a wooden floor because he had a lot of materials. Then he went to the forest to look for a giant tree, noticing that it was the straightest in the area and seemed beautiful and tall. He recalled a scene on television where they said drying wood was necessary for its processing, but in reality, it took several years. Therefore, he decided to first use magic to cut off the branches and then remove the bark. Tenno noticed that the wood was of good quality, so it was time to process it into boards. For this, he used wind magic and quickly finished the work, but forgot to cut the base, and now the boards were supposed to fall on them. The scene returned to the present time, and he noted that next time he would definitely cut the stump after felling the tree. Now he needed to deliver the boards to the front edge of the base. He instantly teleported to the 4th floor into the bedroom. After informing the others, he decided to start laying the floor. At first, she thought that the floor just needed to be covered with a few boards, and it would be a simple job. While working, he quickly noticed that the gaps and thickness of the boards were uneven. Moreover, the boards were too heavy and large, even though he could move instantly and make precise adjustments. His perfect technique of laying floating planks turned out to be a mess. After thinking, he realized that relying on a solid floor could cause problems later. He sat down, sighed, and noticed that there was still a lot of work left. He decided to change his approach and regretted not having a proper cutting tool to slowly plane the boards. The stone in his hands was too rough, so he decided to make a tool from silver ore. He stretched the metal to make it thinner, then gave it a shape that looked like a real blade. After sharpening, he checked the blade and found that it was quite effective. Ko, who had been watching the whole time, was clearly impressed, and Tino added that although the stone mountain was not soft, he would have to handle the blade very carefully. The rocky mountains turned out to be strangely flexible when magic passed through them, and he found it interesting. He began to wonder if he could make a pot because he wanted not only meat, but also other food, something more. Continuing to think, his thoughts turned to door hinges, and he began to make a doll. He said that the windows could be opened, and that it was worth installing hinges on the door to the 4th floor. The doll he made turned out to be quite cute. He made a few more and noted that he hadn't played with clay for a long time, and it was very fun. The stones he used seemed to shine, and he thought he could make only their eyes glow. Having finished his creations, he did not notice how he fell asleep, and in the morning he woke up and decided to let them sleep a little longer. When he stood up, he noticed that everything in the forest was neatly arranged. The foundations were in place. To his surprise, the dolls were moving on their own. They worked together, lay boards, and build the floor. Tenno and the wolves washed themselves and returned to look at him. He was puzzled. There were 9 dolls, all made from stone walls that he had crafted the previous night. He could not understand how they came to life. Then he remembered a childhood fairy tale about elves who secretly made shoes at night. Tenno even wished for the floor to be finished while he slept, and thought that maybe that was why it was completed. He noticed that one of the dolls was still in place, and assumed it did not move because he had no clear idea of it during creation. Then he asked them all to stop working and gather in front of him. Suddenly they stopped and, to his surprise, gathered at his command. Then he addressed the last one, called it a helper robot, and simply ordered it to move. Then the last doll began to move, and Tenno felt immense happiness seeing this. Tenno said that he leaves this task to all of them, and then he watched as they got back to work again. He marveled at how quickly and neatly they worked. It was already 5 o'clock, and they finished everything so fast while remaining organized and tidy. They were also quite cute. The wolves were shocked to see the dolls and started calling them golems. They were clearly concerned, and one of the wolves asked Ko if these were the same types of weapons that people used to attack the forest, and Ko asked everyone to calm down. Tenno realized that the wolves were initially afraid of the stone dolls, but hoped that over time they would get used to them and start getting along. Tenno asked the dolls to make the floors on the 2nd and 3rd floors in the same style and gave them some free time, so he decided to go explore the forest again. He went with the wolves, who told him they would bring a lot of meat, however. But South had a different plan and decided to find vegetables and spices. They continued walking, and Tenno noticed that the fog that was there earlier seemed to linger the further he went. He kept clearing the area as he walked. Although the source of the curse was where the light flowed, he constantly sent the curse back and wondered what would happen to the one on the other side, since everyone reaps what they sow. He said that compared to when he first arrived, the forest had become much brighter, and then asked Ko if it had been like that at the beginning. 10 unnoticed fruits hung on the tree. It was the first time he had seen something like that. He was not sure if it was edible. He stopped, wondering if he could even climb the tree, although the fruit was right in front of him, he could not reach it. At that moment the chief jumped up, leapt onto the tree, and began to climb. 10 from Smile, pleased that he managed to do it, noticed that the other 8 wolves were also climbing the tree. Upon closer inspection, he noticed that they had no wings and assumed that they might be hang fighters. But it seemed to him that he had met them only a week ago, and they were growing so fast. He hoped it was just his imagination. Ko and others were also growing up. Currently, his height was about 185 centimeters. Then he noticed that the spiders were carrying something and was surprised how they managed to get it. He held the fruit and doubted whether it was edible because it had an appetizing, bright red color. It was clear that fallen fruits had already been eaten by animals. He cut the fruit with a sharp object that he had in his hand and took a bite, and it turned out to be incredibly tasty. He even shed a tear and said that after such a long time, the taste of something sweet is completely different. The fruit was crunchy, tasting like a peach, ripe and delicious. He gave some to the spiders and the company. After that, they gathered all the fruits. He said that he accidentally took more than he planned and didn't know what to do with them. Even when he forced them in, the bag could only hold one. He wanted the bag to work like the pocket of a certain robot. He kept putting fruits into the bag, amazed that so much fit inside. The magic was truly incredible. On the way back, he gathered some more food. All the wolves went hunting for a wild boar and finally brought it with them. Tenno said they returned, informed Hayo that he brought a large haul, and asked if anyone was hurt, and Hayo asked him to look at himself in Sakai, who caught the most. Tenno told them that first they have to clean everything, and then he laid out all the fruits and vegetables and said that he brought too many without salt. But with these, their diet would definitely improve. Then he began preparing for prayer and said he would make a cut to let the blood out, and then remove the skin with the wind. He did just that, cut the meat, and prepared it for eating. The walls seemed to want to bite in. It is worth remembering that. The inside stuck out a little, apologized to them, but asked to eat everything. While Ko and the others were eating, he measured out some meat for himself and for storage. Shine said that the meat prepared by Tenno was very clean and easy to eat, and that it was the best, and Karu noticed that there was a lot of liver that day. Tino replied that the front part of the house could get cramped, and if he had salt, he would make ham and other dishes, and he wished he knew how to tan leather. He used the refrigeration room on the first underground floor. The vegetable storage needed tables for cooling products, but now it was not suitable. He he decided to think about a solution later. While the meat was cooking, Karen felt drawn to him. Tenno approached, said the meat was well cooked, thanked Karen, and added that he preferred cooked meat. He also described a vegetable with a light sweetness, something between cabbage and lettuce, although raw, with a tender center. He recalled a sour fruit with a refreshing smell, although it was bright green, and said what it was like. He squeezed it on top of the grilled meat. He did. He tried the dish and said it was hot and gently sweetish, spreading in their mouths, and the sourness added another layer of flavor. He even said that it was tasty, although it was just ordinary meat, and he wanted some sauce. It reminded him that except for Karen, everyone else gathered around, and he wondered what happened to the chief. For 3 days they laid the floor on the upper floors, and he was glad that the dolls managed all the heavy work, even up to the kitchen. Since it was important, he decided to make it even better and asked them to make a frame measuring 200 x 160 x 60, and wondered if they would cope with it. Then he approached the chief and thought that now, when food and shelter were arranged, only one thing remained to be done. He noticed that the chief was getting bigger and remarked that this, as expected, was a bit scary. The chief spoke in his language, asked Tenno to look at his body, and explained that thanks to the generous amount of manitno poured into him, he had significantly recovered. He said that the children could not contain their gratitude. Tenno also needed a lot of mana for the barrier and golems. And the chief continued to supply them and the forest with mana. Sometimes Tenno worried about him. Approaching, Tenno thought that the chief wanted to say something, and he felt that the chief was smart and at least friendly. Tennono then said that he had something to ask the chief. The things he always carried began to wear out, although he read cleansing spells on them every day. He noticed that like spiders, they should be good at crafts, although he had never seen the chief break anything like that. Tenno really wanted new clothes. He then started talking about trade and asked the chief if he knew any plants they could gather that would last longer since. The boss did not answer. Tenno wondered if he understood at all. Then he decided to set off with Chief, Chi, and Kuro, explaining that he took only Chi and Kuro with him because Ko was not nearby. And then he told both of them that he was counting on them. They both growled, and Kuro said in their language that it was unexpected for them to be assigned this task. Chi agreed, saying that it seems Tenno doesn't really need them. He believed that it was a good opportunity to show Ko, who had always been concerned about Chase's strengths, saying to Tenno that he will do everything possible to justify the expectations of his master. Tenno called the leader and asked if it was here. Then they saw giant caterpillars, and the wolves were stunned. When the boss was standing there, Tenno wondered if something had happened to him. He walked away from the caterpillar and said that maybe she could fulfill his wish. Karu and Chi were skeptical and said that those were Suesova, magical beasts with deadly poison. The chief assured them that if they did not provoke the caterpillars, everything would be fine and he would handle it. It was then that the caterpillar stretched and grabbed Tino by the hand, surprising the chief and the others. The chief wondered what the caterpillar was doing. Tino, a little surprised, said that it really scared him, but for a moment he felt that the caterpillar attracted him. It turned out to be different from what he imagined, but looked strong and suitable for use. He passed this on to the chief. The chief said that for a moment he was ready to burn alive from Tino's barrier. Kuru and Chi were puzzled and said that there was no help right now. Tino then asked the chief how many of those larvae they could take with them. They put one on Kuru and one on Chai, and on the way back the chief told them that the caterpillars would not spit poison. Explain this clearly so they can trust him. Tino apologized to the wolves for this. When they met Ko was surprised to see that Kai was collecting insects again. Tino warmly hugged him in response, greeting him, and when Chi was about to say something, he stopped and said he was just joking, and as always Chi had a very cute reaction. Tino entered the hut and thought that while working on the toilet and refrigerator he understood something. It turned out that certain magic could be embedded in stones so that it worked constantly. He also came up with a new plan. A strategy to avoid floor contamination through the use of automatic cleaning. He decided to turn the second floor, which he did not use, into a breeding room and also install a ventilation window. Then he put a few necessary leaves into the food and placed caterpillars on them, saying that now he needed someone to take care of them because he couldn't manage on his own. When he was making stone dolls and told them that they would take care of the caterpillars got scared. Tino was surprised because the dolls were so cute. And yet the caterpillars were afraid of them, and the work with threads seemed to be going well. And Tenel began to think about how to better make the fabric. He took off his t-shirt to give it to the dolls for inspection. They started discussing something, and Tenna wondered if they had already found a solution. It seemed they were not going to make the bed immediately. One of the dolls led him to the bed, and he was delighted, saying that it was even better than he had imagined. He said it was strange that they managed to do it in just half a day. Now he was closer to leading a civilized way of life, and he eagerly awaited the night. At night, everyone slept near the bed. Tino lay on it and thought that now he was beginning to appreciate the bed. The work of the stone dolls was impressive. The next day he could not believe that yesterday there was just a stone wall here. Now everything had completely changed, even stylish furniture appeared that he had seen before on the internet. They served him food, everything was ready, chopsticks, water, and everything else. When he started eating, he was surprised at how well everything was thought out and noticed that the food and water were twice as good as usual. He noticed that there were only 8 dolls, and the other 2 were in the caterpillar's room. He put on a new light green t-shirt with black pants. The smooth fabric felt like silk. He half-jokingly asked not to tell anyone that the color of their clothes changed depending on what they ate. Finally, he sighed with relief, for he also had enough underwear in the form of a spear. It was a bit awkward when he examined them. He noticed a sewing machine that he had seen on television long ago and thought that probably they made it themselves, and it was really impressive. He thought that it was time to change the pace. He decided to set off into the forest with Ko, Shine, and Hale, feeling that the search would be fruitful that very day. He was already beginning to want some spices. Penno had only 1 stone and hoped that there was still rock salt or something similar nearby. As they moved forward, they found another cave, 10. He noticed that although he had not been in this area before, it was good that the large wavy field was quite close to their home. He noticed a slight weakening inside and became worried, feeling the presence of a curse or something similar. He made a small fire and ordered the wolves to stand guard. "Let's go inside," he said. They went deeper into the cave and found a wild path leading even lower. As they moved, they heard sounds from inside. Going further, they came out into a large open space and there encountered a colony advancing in masses. Tina was shocked but immediately rushed forward, full of desire to fight. Hannah realized it was not the time to stand idly and watch. He asked for a ride. He activated the power of cleansing, but it did not work. Then he tried to set up a barrier, but the ants still approached him. House quickly intervened, blocking the ants' path and pushing them away. Tenno stood up, but the ants continued to advance. The black patterns on the ants' bodies gave him a disturbing feeling. They were still inside the barrier, surrounded by ants that seemed to be trying to break through. Although the barrier held, Tenna did not know what to do next. The cleansing method was not working, and he did not know what to do next. He thought about the black patterns on the ants' bodies, and he remembered the first time he met the wolves, and then noticed a similar black haze around them. Perhaps their bodies were completely engulfed by a curse. If so, exorcism might help. The ants continued to attack from above, but the barrier still protected him. Tendon muttered that this was not good while trying to imagine a clear image in his mind. He wondered if it was possible for 2 different beings to exist in one body, as in possession. He imagined a state in which the true eye of the ants were bound and could not break free. Then he understood what was happening and said that he would lift the curse that bound their souls. He decisively used his power to untie the bonds and free all ends. But the scene reminded him of a dark period in the past when the forest was engulfed by dark magic, the rivers disappeared, and the fruits became poisonous. The king of the forest, who once ruled and protected it, vanished when the curse was lifted from the forest, and no one could enter the human world. Shocked by the sudden appearance of new monsters, Tenov saw how the forest were again engulfed by darkness. The ant's vision blurred as dark magic wrapped around his body. He feared that over time he would turn into another creature that would harm the forest. But no, he could not allow that. As one of the kings of the forest, he refused to accept such a fate. He turned to the water dragon of the forest, who once ruled all worlds, for help. The scene returned to the present time, where Tenno placed his hand on the ant's head and said that now everything would be fine. The surface was smooth and cold to the touch. But suddenly the ant moved, and Tina wondered what was happening. Ko turned to the ant and asked if that was An Farumi, because he looked so different that Ko did not even recognize him. However, An recognized Ko as King Fenrir. The ants freed them, and 10 of them thanked the ants, then followed behind. He remembered that Cohen said everything was fine, and noticed that they had been following the ants for half an hour. He doubted whether it was really fine, but felt that the ant leader resembled their chief and did not seem bad. Finally, they reached the place, and Tenno scanned the surroundings using light magic, and discovered a dark curse there, Ko asked seemed to be the home of water dragons. This. The ants answered affirmatively and explained that once Burva was a beautiful sacred lake filled with rich magic. Tina realized that, as he feared, it was already too late for the lake. Feeling a surge of determination, Tanom used his abilities to absorb and cleanse the curse. I think there may be other creatures around the Rocky Mountains who were captured, and we suffer like the ant. He felt the curse spreading throughout the forest and promised to send the broken curse back twice as strong. Then he removed the binding spell from the entire forest. An act that shocked the company. When the Tenno finished the cleansing, they reached the lake and saw an incredibly beautiful view. And the ant felt how the cleansing power works, heals, and restores its strength. He stretched, felt tension, and became thoughtful. The search for seasoning unexpectedly turned into this. Then he suggested continuing the hunt. Muraha followed him, and the tenor was surprised by her behavior. When they moved on, he noticed a fruit under his hand and felt that it was both strange and familiar. Out of curiosity, you picked it up to find out if it could be eaten. He sniffed it but did not smell anything. When he bit off, he was immediately struck by a strong saltiness. Exactly the taste he had dreamed of. He returned to Ko and said they needed to take as much as possible and quickly go home. Meanwhile, Lady Lost with a group of knights was surveying the forest. But they felt bad and moved slowly, some even fainted from the tension. The scene shifts half a month back in the castle, where Miss Lost was sitting with gamers and asking for a break. He had only returned from the forest yesterday, and now he had to conduct another inspection. He thought the king wanted him to die from overwork. Gamer told him to leave it and pretend he heard nothing. Miss Lost later recalled how those people made such a fuss when the ward magic stone cracked, but after a thorough inspection, it turned out that nothing serious. Usually, magic stones from monsters were almost the size of a fingertip, and the castle stone was huge. That small scratch was worthless. The gamers agreed and said it was true. The records even showed that the magic stone was already covered with cracks when first found, and Miss Lusdegree considered it pointless to worry about it. He noticed that this time everything was different than during other reconnaissance missions, and if there really was a problem, they would have to solve it as best as possible, since from the beginning the Fourth Order of Chavurik was a unit with great experience in the forest. It was created to catch and subdue monsters, and serving the forest also became its duty. Miss Lau thought he had been to the forest many times, but in reality nothing happened there. It was just a dark and gloomy but useful place. He said that if the inspection was normal, it would mean that there were no problems. The players asked if it was true and if something was happening in the center of the forest. Miss Law sighed and replied that gamers could not seriously claim that there were kings of the forest there. The gamers did not even know what to say and were afraid to react, and Miss Lost asked what they were afraid of, reassuring that because of the evil gaze of the monsters, there were many, and it was now difficult to reach the energy of the forest. But even if something appears, it does not mean that the strongest kingdom in the world will ever lose. So it will be. When Miss Lost was preparing to leave, the bottle was passed around in turn by the village slaves who were assigned to reconnaissance and household chores. Miss Lost agreed, said that he would leave it to the boy and that they would set off as soon as the knights were ready. Only a few traveled because usually the road to the forest took 10 days. The boy also agreed to set off. Lady Lost wanted to know why Hammer seemed so worried. Then the man asked if something had happened to the First Order team. Mislis replied that it was not so. He had long been friends with gamers and believed that because of his mind, he tended to overthink everything. Among the gamers of the Chavurik Order, there was only one who hardly used slaves. Miss Lost noted that gamers seemed to use slaves as people. From birth, endless slaves were branded with a powerful slave mark. This deprived them of the ability to feel emotions and even think independently. They could not speak without orders. Nanzi was much worse, but although it would be easier not to think about them, because of his loss, he could see nothing in them but slaves. The man agreed and added that he himself felt the same. He thought that the fifth commander was treated a bit harshly. Miss Lost added that no matter how they did it, sacrificing so many people for the sake of the magic stone is unacceptable. But he restrained himself and suggested forgetting about it. The man said that part of his loss he even liked. Miss Lost wondered if the man was laughing at him. The scene shifted to Hammers, who was writing a letter and pondering what Miss Last had said earlier. Gamers did not believe that Miss Lost could find anything without going to the center of the forest. Although they said that the Fourth Knightly Order knows this forest, in reality, they covered less than 10% of its territory. The forest occupied half the world, and no one had yet reached its center. Several hundred years have passed since the spell was cast, and and even today there were reports of revenge from the kings of the forest. But people said that beyond the mighty forest barrier, there was no force that could affect the magic stone. Moreover, since the stone was opened, it was to be strengthened by numerous sacrifices brought to it. The players then wondered if a creature had appeared there that surpasses the kings of the forest. Half a month later, the scene shifted, and Miss Lost with his squad fought the monster. They plunged their swords into it and finally killed it. The knights rejoiced at the victory, but Mislos ordered them to leave it. The man nearby also noticed that something was wrong. Mislu noted that half a month had passed since they entered the forest, and there were unusually few monsters, and the man nodded, adding that by this time they had encountered only a few foreign creatures, whereas usually they would have come across at least 10. Miss Last also noticed that all the creatures they had met so far were enhanced magical beasts of the kingdom, and they were made to attack only the natural inhabitants of the forest. He regretted not taking Jishin with him, because they could not properly assess the situation on their own. He had a strange feeling, and when he listened carefully, he heard rustling in the trees and felt a dark, ominous presence nearby. He did not understand what was happening in the forest, and someone reassured him that they were still on the usual path, and it was the same forest as always. But Miss Lost could not shake the feeling that the air was somehow too clean, and she felt unusual discomfort. And fear was slowly creeping up on him. Others seemed to feel something strange too. Miss Lost thought that they were reaching the boundary and suggested taking a brick of salt. He addressed the reconnaissance squad ordered them to go forward, check for dangerous creatures, and return in an hour. When they set off, Miss Lo thought they still had a long way to go. If there was no danger, they would camp here briefly. He ordered 5 from the slave group to take turns standing guard for 6 hours each, while the rest prepared the camp. Others hesitated to set up camp there, and Lady Lost asked if they wanted to say anything, but they objected. While they were carrying out the task, Miss Laws thought that if she failed to bring the squad to their senses, they might do something reckless. The slaves did not feel fear or anything similar, and Lady Lost wondered if this was normal, since they had no emotions from birth. A man informed him that there were no threats in the district, because the slaves had a keen sense of smell and hearing, so for now they would be safe. Miss Lost was about to respond when a flash of light appeared in the sky. They all froze in shock, and Miss Lost thought a beam of light had passed. But there was no attack and no one fell. They allowed the mechanism code on the screen, and they saw that the ground was glowing, which stunned the guards. He lost control but regained himself again, preparing for an ambush. After everything that happened, they all lay unconscious. They wondered what had happened, and Miss Lo guessed that the Forest King had attacked them. But it seemed that everyone who fell had simply fainted, and no one appeared to be hurt. A man approached him and said that all the slaves had already left. He was stunned by the loss and wondered if they had all been destroyed. The man objected and said that it seemed they had escaped on their own. Mrs. Loss was surprised to hear this and wondered if the comb had broken. He knew he would have to report this to the king. Tino was walking with the creature and said that since it was joining them, it needed to be given a name. Seeing its bright red body, he decided to name it Shuri. Shuri was touched when she received the name. When they returned home, Kuru said that their master was late, and they did not like sitting at home with dolls. Ko asked what happened. Karu explained that he was returning from hunting and, as always, was carrying the prey to his master's room, but when the dolls saw him, they attacked him with such an angry look that he had never seen before. It was the most terrible moment. Just then Sharid appeared, and Kuru, seeing him, was shocked and recalled disbelief in the Hell Garden. The chief came and asked why Shuri was with their master. Sherry replied that this was exactly what they needed to ask, why they were there. It was clear that there was deep rivalry between them. Tenno, seeing the tension, asked them not to fight because there were bad relations between them. Shuri reluctantly agreed to cooperate, and the chief said that they would never understand each other. However, if Tenno could prove Shuri's value, neither of them would have to lose their home. Ko considered it impressive that Tenno, with his strength, managed to unite two races that usually could not coexist. It reminded him of the case with the Phoenix and how their affairs were then. He entered the room and saw that even the ceiling was already ready. The dolls called him, and he realized that they had already used all the boards from the square timber. He also remembered that the next day he had to do an important task. Gathering fruits, he realized that many things had happened, but now it was time to make the salt he had long wanted to create. He was not sure if it would work, so this time he decided to use about 5 fruits and leave the rest in the storage. Earlier, he had tried placing vegetables in the storage, attempting to create something like a time-stop spell. Looking at the fruits now, he thought it turned out quite well. At first they covered the silver or bowl with a thin cloth, and with all their might they squeezed the juice out. He reminded them to simmer carefully so it wouldn't burn. There was still some liquid left, so he strained it once more. After 2 hours of hard work, he finally managed to make some salt. He hurried, saying that something so special deserves its own container. He filled several containers and noted that as a result he had turned all the fruit into salt. The idea that it is possible to transform those hard gold ores into impressive containers caused admiration. Not only silver, but also the ability to freely control gold, which was once saturated with magic, would have been impossible even for him before. He spent half a day giving all his strength, and in the evening it was time to enjoy delicious meat. While he was preparing, he lightly sprinkled the thawed steaks with salt and aromatic herbs and let them sit for a minute. They watched him and Ten apologized, saying that salt is something he will not share with them. He continued frying the meat over the fire and regretted not having a frying pan or cast iron pot and some oil. Lard can be made from pork fat, and although he had only seen it on television, he was now improvising. After grilling, he wrapped the steaks in thick leaves to let them rest a bit. Finally, he browned the outside once again. When the meat was ready, he was about to take a bite when 2 wolves approached him. Enjoying the taste, he pushed the food aside and told the wolves that their portions were already prepared outside. He reminded them that it was salty, so they could not eat it. He still gave them some and assured that he was not trying to feed everyone something strange. When he looked back, he gave Karen some too. He realized that Karen was not there and saw her fly into the sky. He kept waiting for her to return the next day, but she never came back. Although she was a strange bird, she should be fine. He could not help but worry. She was small and defenseless, and there was always a risk of attack from a dangerous animal. When he spoke in his native language and said this to Ten, if he was worried about Karen, it was unnecessary. For the person who was closest to him, Karen should have already accumulated a large amount of magic. In fact, Karen was regaining more strength than Ko. Ten and Ko cry and wonder if Ko was also worried about him. He asked them not to leave him and, hugging Ko, decided that, after calming down a bit, he should find something to do to distract himself. Recently he tried tanning leather, but it was very difficult. At first he thought it would be a good way to get rid of flesh and fat, but when he tried to use magic for this, everything turned against him. He poorly adjusted the process and ended up making a large hole with a knife. After he painfully tore off the flesh, every time he tried to wash off the dirty residues. The water became deeply black, and the belt hardened and began to smell unpleasant. Finally, after all this, they reached the most difficult obstacle, painting. This was always where something went wrong. No matter what he did, the leather tanned and nothing could soften it. As expected, he knew little about tanning, so he could not understand what caused it. He then gave Coast some food and said it was the last time. He thought that if he had fur, he could make a bed or a rug. If he also had leather, he could make shoes or even accessories. It seemed his goals were expanding. One of the wolves wondered what Tenno had been doing lately. Another replied that it seemed unrelated to food. When the wolves returned with the prey, Tenno greeted them and asked them to wait a minute. Compared to before, everyone ate significantly more, and there was a lot of work. The chief also brought his prey, showing that he had gone hunting. Tenno realized that since Shuri arrived, the chief seemed more inclined to rivalry, and he wondered how large the animals of this world could grow. Even the size of the coast was comparable to a small car. Then Tenno said that since they had already made salt, it was worth trying to make ham. After some time, he realized that he had accidentally left the first soaking from yesterday. When he checked, the water had become murky brown. He took out the fur and thought that maybe it would still be okay if dried in the air. Later, he noticed that the wool had become softer than usual. Thinking about it, he guessed that the reason was that he had left it in that special pot, which he rarely used. He decided to collect the same type of tree and try to extract the substance from it by boiling, but when he did it, he was not entirely sure if it would work. He named the dolls Shiki. He commented that it was a cute name. Shuri walked around and noticed that he knew the master had created all the dolls. Tina reminded him that so far he had called the smaller ones One Eye and Three Eye. Then he asked One Eye to bring 3 pre-frozen pieces of fur. He explained that he would conduct a care process for them. The dolls worked quickly and Tina was impressed. He said that they even tried different concentrations. They stretched the fur so that it would shrink less during drying. He thought to himself that although he created them himself, they seemed much more skillful than him. 10 of them asked if they wanted to try more tasks, but it seemed that there was no space left in front of the house. He always assigned firewood collection to one person and wondered whether to start clearing more space. Looking at the large fallen log, he noticed that it seemed to be over several hundred years old, and the thought that all these logs came from such a huge tree caused a slight feeling of guilt in him. He showed him the tree and asked in his own language whether it should be cut down. Then he wondered if it was good, because they were still cutting trees. He would have to treat the cut ends of the wood and then carry it to the third floor and the first basement. He noticed how the dolls were taking away the sawn logs and realized that they were still doing something. He had cut down many trees and felt that he had done more than necessary for today. When he was returning to the house, he decided to finish for today. At that moment, the dolls showed him a comfortable chair. To his surprise, it was a hanging chair, which he had wanted since high school, and the details were so precise that it was a bit unsettling. He noticed that they had also made a wooden bathtub, and even on the stairs there was a handrail with wooden steps and small anti-slip pads. But there was still no door to the toilet. He could not help but think that when Karen returned, these changes would definitely shock her. The scene shifted to Karen, who was sitting by the lake that Tenham had already cleaned up. The next day, Tina realized that he needed to decide what to do with the field of stumps, but to his surprise, all the stones had disappeared. He noticed how the ants were dragging the remains of useless logs to the nest. He approached the lair, nodding approvingly and watching their work, thinking to himself that everything was just as he expected. Shari came out of the lair to greet him and added that now this lair was much more comfortable than in Ida Hasuna. Tino understood that Shuri was inviting him inside, but politely declined and apologized that he could not come in. When he looked back, he saw that the ants were digging the ground. They remove stumps and plow the field very efficiently. Inspired, Tenham decided that here he could create a real field that would save him the trouble of constantly searching for vegetables. The plot was small, just enough to feed him, and he thought he could manage it. Then he became curious whether potatoes would grow well in this soil. He asked Churi if she knew any vegetables that could grow well there. Grew in the ground and could be eaten. When Shuri left, Tenno told Shiki that if they were going to cultivate the field, they would have to make their own organic fertilizer, because his father often took him to the fields, so he knows how to do it. He asked Shiki to help prepare the farm and said that in the corner of the field, in the shade of a tree, he would dig a hole and put up a wooden frame. He planned to bury the remains of food, dry leaves, and dry grass one by one. After that, he poured a little water to speed up the fermentation process. As soon as he poured the water, there was only waiting left. He decided to open the compost container. As soon as he opened it, a swarm of beetles immediately ran out, and this surprised him. He did not know how to deal with it. Then he tried to speed up the process, hoping to turn this place into a magical storage for vegetables. To help with this, he made sure that water vapor rose from the soil and created a pleasant aroma. After he dug up and mixed the soil again, he even improved the mixture. Meanwhile, wolves chased a wild boar and managed to bite it, killing it. He said that he had not enjoyed such a good hunt for a long time. Just then, Tenno noticed something flying in the sky and wondered what it was. He told Shiki that the current setting was suitable for now. It was warm, so everything could be left as it was for some time. Suddenly, a giant bird appeared before him. He wondered if it was Karen, and when she came closer, Tenno told her to wait. Suddenly, Karen began to cry. Tenno was surprised and quickly explained that it was not what she thought. He was also happy because he realized that Karen was not only safe, but had become even more beautiful. Cole, who came to investigate, recognized Karen. Karen asked for help with the monster in her language, explaining that his strength was not enough to deal with it. Tenno saw a creature resembling a fluffy ball with wings and felt a curse on it. He used cleansing magic on the beast. When the curse was lifted, they asked together if the water had dried up. Karen replied that now the strength would definitely be restored. Ko reminded them that among the kings, one race of divine beasts ruled over the 5 elements of the forest. These were dragons. For many years, they protected the forest from human invasion, but suddenly disappeared without a trace. If the water dragon was still alive, then the water in the forest would remain clean. Karen agreed and believed it herself. The return of the dragon's power would undoubtedly revive the forest. Then Karen told Ko that he was going to look for other dragons and bring them back to Tenno's side. Ko suggested that given Karen's mobility, it was best for her to do the searching herself while Ko would take responsibility for Ten's security, and Karen replied that he did not think their master needed Ko's protection. Tenno looked at the water dragon and admired its beautiful blue belly, which resembled a fluffy ball. And as befits this world, he wondered if the world was truly alive. Then he asked why it seemed so. Karen did not know, but speaking his language, confirmed that there was definitely a water dragon inside. He petted the creature 10 times, noticing how soft and fluffy it was, and decided to name it Fluffy. Ko was surprised that their master named the water dragon, but Karen agreed, saying it was a good name. Tenno realized that Fluffy liked his name, then Some sounds were heard, and it became clear that Shan and the others had returned. He saw Cheyenne carrying prey much larger, about the same size as Cheyenne himself. What was amazing, Shane proudly said that they caught a big prey. Tenon noticed that Cheyenne's tail was wagging quickly, and remarked that he seemed more satisfied than usual, and especially happy now. Tenno recalled that recently he had encountered various creatures, first numerous spider offspring, then a bird, and now this mysterious creature. He thought that wolves should also be happy, especially since this was another world. Lately he felt that his skills were constantly improving, and he appreciated the work of the wolves. Karen returned, so they decided to hold a feast. Tenno began cutting the meat, noticing that he was even starting to get used to cutting out the heart, although he did not want to eat it. During the cut, he found a stone near the heart of the prey, and wondered whether it was a sign of disease or just a lump. Upon closer inspection, he found several more such stones, but not all the prey had them, so he wondered whether they had always been inside or if something else was at work. He tried to clean the stones, but noticed no changes. Deciding that they were not cursed, he ignored them and paid attention to the things made by the dolls. 10 of them told Ko that he wanted to try to do something that day. At first they prepare for silvering or place on a tray. Then they gathered all the stones, rolled them and laid them out on the platform, and the installation was completed. The stones from the mountain were easy to mold. They retained the effect of the last magic cast on them and were heat resistant. This gave Tenor an idea. He could use them for barbecue. Imagining the properties of coal, he heated the stones, which he put in a container made by a doll. Balls, then he took long sticks and skewered vegetables and meat on them for cooking. Then he said he needed to skewer the ingredients using gold or a skewer. He was used to grilling on a kitchen stove, but now he realized that the shape of the grill was also important. Looking at Karen's face, he told her to wait and assured her that the food would be ready soon. Recently, even the chief started eating cooked meat, while Ko and others continued to eat it raw. It was then that they approached, attracted by the smell of meat. Tenna asked if he had already eaten what was inside, and decided to give him some. He also wondered if Fluffy could eat meat. When he saw that Fluffy was eating it without hesitation, he thought to add some salt and lemon juice to his portion. After biting, he thought it was very tasty. Maybe he should make more kitchen utensils. And a good sauce for the meat also seemed like a great idea. He began to think about how to create them, and realized that these stones did not seem strange at all. Perhaps he could fill them with magic. He tried, and was surprised to see that the magic immediately flowed through the stones. Until then, the most convenient material for magic was stones from the stone mountain, but when their magic was exhausted, they lost their power. He was also worried that the toilet did not flush waste well. Looking at the stone, he wondered if it could also be used for this purpose. However, he needed to check this. It seemed that the more magical power he put into the stone, the more energy it could store. Tenon noticed that the color of the stone had changed. Now bright green, resembling a precious gem. If the same happened with other stones, and it turned out that each acquired a different color. It seemed that the color change depended on the type of monster, and when the color stopped changing, depended on how much magic was poured in. The stones were beautiful, but Tennant did not know how to use them, and thought about selling them for a lot of money, although he doubted it because there were no buyers nearby. He saw Ko, who was looking at the stones, and Tina wondered what was wrong. Go take a deep breath and release fire, shocking the tenor. He asked himself if it was magic. Tenno thought that Ko could use magic, but did not expect such a sudden manifestation. Then Ko lifted the red stone, wrapped himself in fire, and released an explosion. Tina was stunned and confused. When Ko pulled for another stone, Tina realized what was happening. He still did not fully understand what Ko was trying to show him, but it seemed that Ko would keep showing until Tina understood. Tenno began to suspect that the stones could amplify magical attacks. He decided to test this on a glass of water. He focused on it and noticed that the amount of water changed. Some were drawn out and others merged into the surrounding water. Just then Shuri arrived and Tina greeted him. Looking at the situation, Tina almost did not notice that he had received a very convenient thing and only later understood its true purpose. Shir offered something to eat and asked Tenno to try it too. Ten wanted to if they could eat all of this. Ants looked at him and Shuri explained that they can even be eaten raw. Tenno tried them with meat and found them very tasty. Of course, then he gave Tenno some, encouraging him to try. Tenno agreed but suggested leaving it in the sun for now because he initially planned to work the field. Shari asked where he was going, and then the chief came and said that their master did not like those things. Tenno headed to the field, asking the dolls when they would finish telling the story. Thanks to the help of the ants, digging became much easier for them. He needed to mix the previously made compost into the soil and continue treating the land with it. He had never made compost himself before, so he was not sure if it would work, but he decided to try. Taking an axe, he began digging the soil, thinking that if the soil was good, he would soon reach the ridge. He kept working and after some time said that the area should be enough. Usually for planting, potatoes were cut in half. Then he noticed something and wondered what it was. He felt it was somehow cursed and doubted whether it was safe to eat. Shuri replied that it was a great find and suggested that if Tenno soaked it in water, it might help accumulate more soil. Then he finished working the field and felt strange. He had only planned a small garden, but it was turning into a whole farm. He had already planted 100 potatoes, but more than half of the field was still empty, so he doubted his calculations. Shuri was sad and wondered why Tenno buried the potatoes after they had harvested them. Ko said that if the owner wanted to preserve them, he could have used an underground storage. Turen added that she did not know why, but felt that Tenno must have a reason to avoid this option. Tino said he does not mind planting them now, but the season is warmer now than when he arrived. Moreover, on such a large field, weeds would be a problem, and he did not know how to deal with everything, so he wrote. He realized that he needed more stone dolls to help. He greeted his puppets and thanked them for their hard work. Now, while the workers were tending the field, he decided to check the lake. The water was cleaner than before, almost crystal clear. He thought about making soy sauce, but did not know how to grow soy. However, if there were fish in the lake, he could try making fish sauce instead. He recalled a TV show he once watched that said fish sauce is made by mixing fish with salt and letting it ferment. He had a habit of collecting such random information. Fluffy approached him, and he thanked Fluffy for his efforts. He said that maybe the laughter was trying to tell him something, but then he did not understand it. Hidden took the fishing rod and started fishing, explaining that he tried to make something like a fishing hook so it should work. He also said that they would catch fish to eat. After some time, something unexpected appeared on the ground, surprising everyone. 10 of them thought they might have caught something and began to guess whether it had a mouth. He thanked Fluffy, thinking it was all thanks to him, and they decided that this would be enough to make fish sauce. When they had gathered enough, they could stock up on fish sauce and fry the rest. He had not eaten fish for a long time. The scene moved to the castle, where Miss Lost reported everything to the king, and the wizard standing next to the king asked in surprise if the report was real. Gamers watched Miss Lost return and wondered how this could have happened, since less than a month had passed, and he thought something might have happened. At that moment, a man approached Gamers and informed them that all commanders were ordered to gather in the audience hall. When everyone gathered, a bald man, seemingly confused, asked him if he could determine the cause of the crack in the magic stone. Nizlost, a warrior loyal to this country, was always ready to carry out orders without fear. However, at that time, he felt as if he was being judged without a fair reason and was awaiting punishment without cause. He explained that when they approached the entrance to the forest, they suddenly encountered a wall of light. When he regained consciousness, it turned out that all the slaves had already escaped. Moreover, the fangs of their enhanced beasts were torn out. Finding himself in such an incomprehensible situation, he tried to say something. The man asked in surprise if they had died, to which Miss Lost replied that it seemed absurd. The king, clearly irritated, stood up to leave, and the man asked where he was going, feeling that the situation was completely insane. Then the king ordered that the 4th Knightly Order remain on standby for further instructions. When the others left, Jemble called Miss Lost a coward. Miss Lost and the man who went with him on the mission both stood there worried when Gamers approached and said with relief that he was glad they returned safe, and Miss Lost admitted that he still did not quite understand what had happened, and asked Gamers what he thought about what was happening in the forest. Although his appearance was unremarkable, Lady Lowe shared his fear, explaining that it seemed as if the forest was rejecting them. Honestly, Ms. Lowe thought they were dead when they passed through the wall of light, however. Although all the slaves escaped, none of the soldiers acted suspiciously, and he was completely bewildered by what had actually happened. Hammer suggested that it could have been a warning, and that if there was a creature greater than the Forest King, it might have been involved. Mislust asked if Jamers was implying that the King of Power was behind all this. The players replied that this could have happened, but considering how strong the Forest King was, they would have noticed it much earlier. In such a situation, a creature greater than the forest itself could have appeared, which came and settled in it. Meanwhile, the king was walking down the corridor deeply troubled. He considered it impossible that all the slaves remained. And this idea seemed absurd, even if it were possible. This would mean that the slave brands, reinforced by the magic stone, had ceased to function. He said that this was impossible because offerings had been presented to the magic stone for over 100 years to strengthen it. The king then looked outside. His head was spinning. He thought that the country's protective barriers were still intact. But probably something was wrong with the enhanced beasts that were released into the forest, and he assumed that they could regain consciousness through the magic stone. Through the magic stone, they could gain the power of the forest and become rulers of the world. He always obediently followed the will of the gods, and using forest magic, did not allow the forest beasts to resist. There had been no acts of resistance for the last 10 years. A few more steps and it would all be over. He laughed in front of the two women, but quickly became angry. Drawing his sword, he wondered why this had to happen at this very moment. Enough, he muttered, his voice full of rage. The forest will be burned. The panel participants were preparing to make fish sauce and talk about it. The first step was to cut off the head, remove the entrails, and drain the blood so that the fish could be cleanly cut. The silver ornith easily cut the fish. The next day he salted the fish and said that the amount of salt was very important, so he needed to calculate how much to take depending on the amount of fish. For this size of fish, 20% salt should be enough. He continued the process and said that the first step was to rub the fish with a sufficient amount of salt, and then they put the salted fish in a jar and tightly closed it so there were no gaps. He continued until the jar was completely filled, sprinkling a little salt just in case. Then he put the jar in a container and covered it, explaining that it should be stored in a cold, dark place for about a year or two. Tenno thought that because of magic in the world, the result might be different, so he decided to keep it for 3 months. After that, the texture became more viscous, and he smelled fermentation, so he decided to use magic to speed up the process to about a year of aging. Ko wondered what the master was doing now. Shuri did not know, but felt a pleasant smell in the air. Tenno prepared the sauce with the help of magic, but when he smelled it, he felt it stank. However, the smell was unique, and since the fish meat had decomposed, he decided that this should be enough. Now it remained only to strain the mixture through a fine cloth. He executed his plan and was glad that the sauce became a nice light brown color. A precious drop of perfection. After tasting, he found that the saltiness was just right, delicious. Now it was time to heat up to stop the fermentation. Time to cook. We watched MSC cook together. I was cooking this on the barbecue. He also froze the rest of the fish, so that day they decided to enjoy fried fish. Since they were to return soon, they also planned to fry a portion for Karen. When the fish was fully cooked, they flipped it to the other side and sprinkled a few drops of fish sauce. The smell of food filled the air. Then Surf himself took a bite. He reacted completely differently than expected. The chef and the Laptvari company were unsure of his reaction. But then his face lit up. The fish was incredibly tasty with the sauce, and he wanted some rice with it. His efforts finally paid off, and so did he. He enjoyed the moment and noticed that the wolves were starting to approach the fish. He quickly took it away from them and told them to wait, because the food was too salty, it was not suitable for them, and they would not be able to eat it. But when they looked at him, their gaze scared him. In response, he said, "All right, everyone will get a drop." After he realized that he still needed to increase Karen's share. Just then he heard a sound and turned around. It turned out to be Shuri. He told her not to scare him. Jokingly said that it would be better to limit himself to only grilled meat. Now he could finally eat peacefully. Just as he was about to enjoy the food, he saw the chief approaching to take a bite. He was eating fish and said that it was incredibly tasty. However, there was no time to let thoughts wander, because the chef was also watching how others ate. That night he lay on the wolf and said that the day had been very exhausting. There was nothing better than a fluffy bed now. He gently touched the wolf's fur, impressed by how the monsters were gradually changing. It was truly fascinating, and the fur felt extremely soft. He decided to check the fields the next day and thought that the little ones could now be called the farming brigade. He went out into the field and greeted the dolls, saying that his clothes seemed to have improved significantly. When the dolls were working in the field together with the ants, he decided to help them. He asked if they needed anything, but they did not answer. He was shocked. He did not realize that they no longer needed him. Then make sure you come with something in your hands. They were asked for Tenno to pour his magic into him. The chief showed his bigger item. Tenno told them. He will be glad to help. He did not know what he should do. When they applied magic to the items, Tenno thought they were actually trying to pour it out. He asked if that would be enough, but it seemed they also wanted him to pour his magic. When the things started cracking, Tenno apologized and realized that maybe he had overdone it. Suddenly, small insects resembling Shuri and Chief began crawling out of the cracks. 10 of them screamed loudly in surprise. After that, 10 of them left together with the others, apologizing for screaming so loudly. He felt sorry for Shuri and Chief, but he realized he never got along with insects, and if those creatures were centipedes, he would have frozen in fear. Chief was sitting on Kai's back, and Tina doubted whether it was normal for Chi to give him a ride. Tenno told Ko that it was nice to walk with him again after such a long break. When he petted Ko, he asked Shi if he could ride on him too. Stillitz dismissed this thought and turned away. Then he thought that they both had been getting along lately, but maybe they didn't like the attention he was giving Ko. Che disagreed and insisted that it was not so. I teased Chai by saying he was jealous, and he replied that it was not so, but then he looked around. Both Ko and Tenno found his reaction cute. In front of another cave, and then a remark that there were really many caves in the forest. Approaching the entrance to the cave, 10 of them noticed something inside. There were creatures resembling wolves, growling in their direction. The scene shifted to the castle, where numerous mages and knights stood before the king. The man announced that 25 mages from the Second Order of Chavaric would accompany them, and the Fifth Order of Chavaric would handle taming the monsters. The players realized that this was the result of their discussions. Then the king said that until now he had spared the beasts in the forest, and all his actions were for the glory of the country. However, despite his repeated mercy, the beasts continued to resist, and his patience ran out. That is why he decided to burn the forest. The knights understood why they were called here. Finally, the time had come to show what they were capable of. However, the gamers doubted whether it was possible. The mages had terrible power, and the monsters would have no chance against the battle-hardened knights of the Fifth Order of Chavaric. It was very likely that in this situation, they were not dealing with the true rulers of the forest. The scene returned to Tenno, where the beasts were approaching to attack him. But the barrier created by Tenno forced them to retreat. Chi addresses the wolves and tells them to stop doing foolish things and pull themselves together. He then looked at Tenno. Tenno used binding magic and drove the beasts into a cage. Praising that it was good, they were trapped. As soon as he thought, he added that he told Shane not to worry. Then he let them go. But when he freed them, all the beasts suddenly collapsed, spitting blood from their mouths. Tina was shocked and quickly began to treat them. When he did this, he noticed that these beasts were persecuted and looked very exhausted. Something rose inside him, and he muttered that he would never forgive whoever did this to them. Meanwhile, in the castle, the king addressed his subjects. Let's show the forest kings how terrifying the kingdom of Enwellis can be. His words ignited their anger, and with one gesture, the king released lightning into the sky. Within a few days, Tenno tripled the number of people in the farming brigade, and soon a small lake appeared near the field. Tenno asked the ants to help cultivate the land in exchange for it. Fluffy, passing by, stopped by the water and began creating a reservoir to pour it onto the land. Tenno Polygas explained that he did not understand what Fluffy said, and he thought whether Fluffy had suggested cutting down trees to expand the lake. Then Tenno continued working and returned home, saying that the day had been especially hard. Then spiders appeared and nudged him to follow them, and when they led him to the pantry, others noticed this and wondered if everything was all right. When Tenno entered, he saw that the previously empty shelves were now full. He realized that there was not enough space in the pantry for the harvest to have enough food for the winter, so 10 of them decided to expand it. To do this, he stopped time in the cold room and discovered that the dolls were removing the locks. He also noticed that the dolls arranged everything neatly and efficiently, like professionals, putting things in their places. Just as Tenno was about to help, he held back because he was not sure if it was necessary. That is why he went hunting with Ko. Ko told Tenno in his language that sometimes it is worth listening to the heart. Nodding, Tenno called him and asked him to wait. Together they set out hunting. After some time, they reached the edge of the barrier. And Tenno noticed that besides the detour, it took them 2 hours to get there. he doubted whether it was still possible to expand the barrier at all. Soon they came across a dragon and growled at it together. When the dragon was preparing to attack, Ko tried to protect Tenno. Meanwhile, Karen was flying above and was glad he returned earlier because he always felt good inside Tenno's magical barrier. However, when he noticed the one hesitating, he realized how rarely that happens. Karen noticed Tennant on the ground and understood that wyverns have a tough shell, so ordinary attacks were unlikely to work, and he decided to intervene. Surprisingly, Tenno struck the wyvern in the air and cut off one of its wings. This stunned Karen and the wolves and Tenno himself too. He realized that his reflexes worked after the previous clash. He did not expect to cut off the wing, but it happened automatically, as if he had trained for it. After the wyvern's defeat, Tenno asked Ko if he could eat it. Ko's reaction hinted that it would be tasty. At that moment, Tenno noticed Karen, smiled, and greeted him, asking why he looked so surprised. When they were returning home, Ko even gave Chi his share of the wyvern meat, and Chi thanked him. Tenno couldn't even properly examine the work because the dolls wouldn't allow him. He was worried that Chi would leave as soon as he found his friends, but his worries turned out to be unfounded. Tenno has. Feeling a suppressed disappointment, he wondered if anything had changed since then and where the source of the curse might be. At that very moment, lightning struck the castle near the king, and he thought in shock that he was under attack. However, this seemed impossible because the country was protected by a strong barrier. Gamers sat with Mislost and they discussed the attack. Mislost was surprised that the king was attacked, especially since he himself did not see it. He did not understand how it happened if the king had barrier protection. The gamers explained that the lightning struck right before the king's eyes. Miss Laus was impressed by the strength of the barrier, but wanted to know what the king would do next. The gamers told him that the king locked himself in a room with a magic stone and ordered the mages who were supposed to go to the forest to stay and reinforce the barrier with several layers. Miss Laus was surprised and asked why the seemingly invulnerable emperor acted so cowardly. The players replied that under such circumstances they had few options. The country had not been attacked for hundreds of years. The barrier that protected it had never been breached before. Miss Lost pondered the meaning of Hammer's words. The gamers said that someone launched such a strong attack that it pierced the country's barrier. That is why he was also so worried about it. The scene shifted to Tenno, who was with Ko. He wondered if the attack had missed and felt relieved. The remaining pieces of hesitation could still be used. He suggested eating them. He asked the Gons to perform an autopsy on the body, although he doubted whether it was not too large for them. But he was impressed by how quickly they worked. When they were carrying away the remains, he thought that they would surely use every part of this creature's body and wished that it rested in peace. 10 of them were roasting meat and noticed that during cooking it became tougher, and he thought about how it would taste if they then dipped it in fruit juice. The wolf asked Ko if he had ever eaten wyvern meat. Ko replied that the meat was quite elastic, so it was worth eating. But he also noticed a sweet smell from the food that Tino was cooking. Tino felt pressure building on him when he was a boy. Sweet fruit juice together with a vegetable similar to onion, and the aroma was stunning. After mixing the grilled wyvern meat with sauce and adding spices, Tino bit the first piece and said it would be perfect if he could eat it with white rice and fresh eggs. Wrapped together, unfortunately, the wyvern meat did not taste like chicken at all, and this disappointed him. Then he noticed that the dolls were frying a part of the meat, so he decided to try. Reflecting, he remembered a TV show about extracting oil from chameleon seeds and imagined that in this world, there might be similar flowers from which oil could also be extracted. He noticed that at Karen's place, the wolves were fighting over the roasted meat, and Karen said it was his. One of the wolves told Karen that he was eating too much and there was not enough for everyone. They asked for bigger portions, and Karen replied telling him to stop pulling and go share with the company. Amid all the chaos, Ten struggled with himself and could not get out of the crowd. He went inside and decided that, although it was impossible to prepare the perfect lean Friday dish for now, they could make something tasty if they fried pumpkins as vegetables and tried to extract oil from them. Because oil could be extracted from various products, so it was worth trying all available options. Tenonal poured some magic on several seeds, tasted one, noticed the taste was different, and thought that useful oil could be obtained from them. He tried another and found that it was even better. It was then that the spiders came and brought a fruit. Tenno thanked them and took it to check what was inside the seed. As he examined it, he suddenly understood something and asked the spiders where they found the fruit. With a glow and curiosity, Ten went with the spiders to the tree where they gathered the fruits. He noticed that the trees grew close to each other, but were outside the barrier. He remembered that the last time he tried to expand the barrier, Ko and others agreed with him. But he still could not achieve what he wanted. The scene turned to Gamers and Miss Lost. Gamers said that the path from the castle entrance to the forest would take about 10 days, and to reach the center of the forest, it would probably take several more months. Miss Lost did not fully understand what Gamers meant. Gamers explained that the plan was to burn the forest from that place, as it might take 3 or 5 attempts to get everything right. Meanwhile, Tenemistot on the land of Felt seemed to be flying over the forest and using magic to survey the area. He noticed one place that caught his attention. Shine asked what Tenno was doing, and Kuro remarked that it looked like Tenno was inscribing birthday wishes on his body. Tenno replied that he would first determine the size of the barrier, then cleanse the place. The scene returned to the king, who was sitting in a room made of magic stone, and confidently said that now no attack would break his barriers, and he believed this would be the last attempt of the beasts. Gamers said that with greater power, they could oversee not only the country, but perhaps the entire world. Meanwhile, Tenno was ready to return the curse to where it came from and do it fully. A bright light appeared around the magic stone, and all the sages froze in surprise. Tenno, standing in place, said he would never forget the curse placed on the land, and that all those curses would soon return to the one who cast them. Above the magic stone appeared a ball of lightning that released a series of discharges, hitting everyone present. Tendon said that the curses on the rivers and lakes would also return, and he cleansed all the trees, roots, and even the leaves. The color of the magical stone changed, and the mages and the king were left in shock. Tenno then felt something strange, as if something inside him was shifting. After a few days, Ko was patrolling the area, and noticed that it would take more than 1 day to go around the entire territory. Events turned back a few days, and everyone felt the approach of a strong wind and wondered where it was blowing from. And he realized that he no longer felt the presence of the barrier. The chief assumed that something might have happened to Master Tenno. But when he turned around, he saw that the doll was still working. And then Tenno approached and asked why everyone had gathered. Ko could not help but think that Tenno had destroyed such a large obstacle without any effort, and he wondered what Tenno was planning. One day, Tina returned home and saw a finished wooden terrace. It was very spacious. He noticed that the sliding doors opened and closed easily, and the doors to every room, including the toilet and bathroom, just as he wanted. When he looked around, a doll approached him and called him, looking worried. Only the massive frame of the sliding doors they had built was visible. They brought several stones, and Tenno realized they needed glass for the doors. So he created it for them using magic. After that, Tenno checked the living room and saw that it was perfectly clean. He asked if he could inspect the walls, and the dolls agreed. When he did, he noticed that the walls seemed to be infused with magic, probably from the dolls and cameras. He thought to leave everything as it was and went to inspect the oil extraction machine. He used magic, pressed the device, and realized he could control it further. Tendon expected to extract only a small amount of oil, but the result was better than he hoped. The oil had a pleasant pink color and a sweet aroma, which interested him. He was satisfied with the result and inspected all the extracted oil, but realized that in the future he would have to upgrade the extraction apparatus. He thought that the fried vegetables, similar to eggplants, turned out tasty, and thought that the wolves might like the fried vegetables. Maybe it's worth serving them in small portions. While Tina was feeding the wolves, Chi approached him, expressing gratitude for his friends beginning to recover. But his friend asked if it was really safe to trust the person, and Chi replied that they felt the gentle magic of Tenno. The wolves hesitated a little more, then he smiled and said he was glad to see everyone getting better, after which he offered the wolves more food. While they were eating, Tenno noticed that the wolves seemed to really like vegetables, resembling pumpkins. Reminded him that he had not named them yet, so he decided to name them. He named the male wolves Chair and Chada. The one with white spots was Hara, and the female wolves would look at me again and again, and the one with red spots and red eyes was Kiza. Tenno wanted to include the kanji symbol for T in their names, and he could not help but think that his sense of names was impeccable. Later, Tenno went into another room and saw that the kitchen area was perfectly clean. The dogs served meat to chase away the friends, who were now happily eating. Tenno entered his room and sat with Ko and others, saying that it was good that he could finally fry food. He still wanted a frying pan and was thinking about how to find iron ore, especially since he didn't have magnets. Then he suddenly remembered the magnet in his wallet. Every day when they went outside, they constantly searched for iron ore. Tina said that actually, he was just randomly searching for iron with a small magnet, and was glad he remembered the magnet in his wallet. They searched in the area inside the barrier, but there were already many caves there. Tina wondered if this area had ever been volcanic. They could not get to the innermost part of the mountain, and it was already the 5th day. He thought about how many places they had already visited. They found many different stones, but none was the ore he was looking for. Although he was not tired, the constant hunting exhausted him, so he decided to return. It was then that he noticed a dark path through the bushes and thought it might lead to another cave. He lit around himself with magic and set off along the path. To his surprise, he came across a structure and thought it might be an entrance, but it was not cold like a usual cave entrance. He saw a squirrel with a blue screen and wondered if it was still alive. He applied cleansing and touched the animal. But nothing happened. Suddenly the squirrel broke free. He looked at the ground and continued to look at him. He thought it was cute, and although wolves usually eat squirrels, it seemed they were not interested in him. He could not understand why, so he asked Kiza if direwolves usually do not hunt small animals, and Kiza replied that it was normal. Then the squirrel pointed to her companions and made a sound, giving a Tenno signal. He understood that the squirrel wanted him to save her friends. He did so, and soon the squirrels gathered around him and playfully played with him. He thought there were too many of them. Kiesa looked nervous and urged them to leave and help their master. It growled, causing the squirrels to scatter, and Tenno sent a request for help. He thought that if there was only one squirrel, there would be no problem. On the way back, Tenno thought that they had walked all day, visited 4 different places, but still without success. He admitted that finding iron ore would not be easy, but they had plenty of time, so they decided to act without haste. Then they reached the cave where Tenno found Kisa and others. It was only 15 minutes from home. And they had not yet explored this, but Ten thought it might be in vain. He saw a piece of metal and realized that it was exactly what he needed. He was disappointed because this key was the closest to his home, and he had spent all his time on another. When Tenno returned home, Karen came back and said that he also did not find any dragons that day, and Cole noted that Tenno had just arrived. Karen was surprised to see a squirrel on her shoulder. This scared the squirrel, and it quickly ran away. He realized that the act was a bit childish. Shuri said he understood, added that he did not even know that squirrels had entered their home, and that he did not like them very much. Tenhams, however, thought about how the number of creatures had grown and wondered if they could all get along. Soon the dolls gathered in front of Tenno. He was puzzled and did not understand what they wanted. But they led him to the field. There he noticed that the field had been plowed less than 2 months ago, and now they could harvest about 10% of the crop. They only helped sow the seeds and watered a few times, and he wondered if they could also help with the harvest. When he looked around, Tenon noticed vegetables that looked charred, pumpkins, and a large vegetable resembling bacon. They were all huge. In the kitchen, he cut them, saying that he had never returned any before, and what they couldn't eat, they threw into his compost. The vegetable resembling a potato was soft and crumbly with a pleasant sweet aroma, but it didn't taste very good, so they decided to set it aside. If everything went well, next time they could add more spices. The chief tried it and said it was tasty, surprised that the root was so sweet, and Shuri guessed that Tenno had brought more vegetables. Ten thought that if only they could eat more of that. He looked around at another. He looked at the others and wondered what they were doing before the garden. They lined up and discussed something, and the leader asked for help with it. Tenon barely recovered when the new cultivation map was ready, and it shocked him. They didn't even ask him about it. Then they found iron ore and made a frying pan from it. The scene reminded him of the wild wolves, where they fought a long time with an unknown enemy. When Chase's allies, engulfed in darkness, attacked him, he lost himself and was ready to die. But when he came to, only a few of his comrades remained nearby, wandering around. They wonder if the place they found was built by the king, so they could hide a little. One of them agreed that it was worth resting there a bit and preparing to fight the people to the death. After everything, one of them woke up and asked himself if he had lost consciousness. He also felt a healing wind and thought it might be magic. His body became lighter, his mind clearer. He called the others and asked if they were still alive. Although he was not in the best condition, the healing wind gave him strength to catch small prey. Looking around the forest, he noticed that the Mayasimi had disappeared and assumed the threat had retreated. Another wolf approached him and said he would go hunting together with the first wolf. The first wolf thanked him and noted that it was also worth thinking about helping the other comrades. Just then they heard a sound from the entrance. Cheyenne-ko surprised them all. They said that because of its huge size, it could not be a dark wolf. There was also a spider. When it approached Tenno, they were surprised and called it an enemy. But when Ko and Chi looked at them, they both seemed threatening. The action shifted to the present, and Tennant was shocked to notice that Conch had grown up. He wondered why, when they cultivated the land and harvested, everything had to be learned by trial and error. To diversify, 10 of them decided to use materials they found while exploring caves. He even learned that little spiders can make threads. Chai also knew how to use magic, and this made Tennu think whether Chai and her company had somehow transformed or evolved. There were puppies in the cave, and Tenon noticed that they seemed to have lost the desire to fight. He decided to apply Purify, Dispel, Heal, and Cleanse on all of them. The wolf noticed that the power he used was the same as the healing wind that filled the forest. They agreed and said that their master had cleansed the forest and returned their strength. The wolf was surprised and thought it was true, and the king of the forest raised his gaze to his master, who was such a kind, charming creature. Tenel looked at Chai and at first thought he looked more like a dog. He wanted Chai to remain that size forever because he disliked being looked down upon. They all went to their house built into a huge rock, and the wide area around it was completely cleared. Tina said he could not fully understand how wild this place was, and were amazed that the field in the middle of their yard simply turned into a forest by itself. That morning there was nothing unusual. The chief greeted Tenno and said that they had followed the instructions of the Golans and planted all the trees that would bear the fruits Tenno wanted in one place. He thanked his clan for their hard work. Shuri added that their clan worked several times harder than the chief's plan required. The terrible walls were shocked to see giant beetles, and some even fainted. Tenno then looked into the forest and saw that it was well cared for. Besides the plants he planted, there were about 90 known species of trees here, almost 200 of which bore fruit. It was impressive, and now they had 30 plants that gave wonderful fruits. He was amazed at how they managed to plant all of this in just half a day. He went to the kitchen and said that if he had the necessary tools, he could make wine from the grapes. They also needed to advertise the vegetables from the freshly cultivated plot because they planned to use them as seasonings. Now they also had an iron pot. It took him about a month to forge a frying pan from iron ore. He easily recognized useful stones and ores. Among them was a multifunctional stone that he used as a substitute for coal in the house and for his one-eyed gom. It was easy to process and had magical properties. Although making iron was difficult, he managed to make the necessary kitchenware. Tools made from silver and gold ore were stronger, but their production required significantly more magic. These materials were well suited for glass windows and knives, and surprisingly, had low thermal conductivity. He picked up the stone and said that fluffy creatures seemed to really like the blue and red glowing ores they found while exploring the cave. He used them to make a semi-transparent bottle, although it lost its shine over time. He collected stones, including magical enhancement stones that regularly appeared in the hearts of certain monsters. He was confident that someday they would become even more useful. First of all, Irish potatoes, resembling cobblestones, were almost tasteless, but they could be made into flour, and he learned this from television, so it should be simple. Now he only had to grate the potato with a silver grater. He immersed the mixture and said that next they would wrap the grated potato in a dry cloth and squeeze it tightly. A white fluffy mass formed. After that, they left it for 20 minutes, then drained the water, and he repeated this process. He soaked the potato in water and drained the water each time, causing sediment to accumulate at the bottom. Then he laid the hardened lumps from the bottom of the vessel onto 2 plates to dry. He continued this method and eventually succeeded. Looking around, he noticed that new lumps lay on top, and others, though rare, were also on the outside. When everyone settled in their homes, he felt lonely, especially since they were so big and there were more dolls around. Then he decided to cook rabbit meat because it most resembled chicken. He rubbed it with salt, coated it in flour, and then cooked it in an iron pot. The pot felt different, but soon he gathered his courage. When he tried it, he was deeply moved and realized that true bravery is incomparable. Taking another piece, he noticed a spider crawling toward him. He offered it some food and asked it not to tell anyone. Then he stood up, got a little scared, and said he would keep the flour that remained. While waiting, he thought about cutting the sweet and bitter scraps because he realized that sugar could be made from them, and he remembered that his mother once made sugar from beetroot. It turned out that there was a lot of scum, and it made the mixture bitter. He removed the foam and continued heating the mixture until it began to thicken and eventually turned purple. He continued the process, separated the solidified parts, and spread them over a large surface to cool. When he tried it, it seemed sweet to him with a rich, umami flavor. Outside, a strange animal was watching them. Go smelled the food and said that it seemed their master was preparing the next dish. Chair noted that he had never smelled such a sweet scent before and found it interesting. When Karen came, she was told again that there was no success. Heron did not understand what he was talking about and replied that she searched every corner of the barrier daily, while Koja, sitting and resting, added that they guarded their master well. 10 of them came with food and said it was time to eat. Everyone gathered to eat, and Tenno explained that he mixed the sugar made that day with previously prepared fish sauce, resulting in teriyaki for red meat. He said that the taste was so good that it could not be described in words, and Ko also agreed, adding that it was very tasty. Under the name Karenji, she said that all the hard work had paid off. She worked tirelessly, flying through the miasma in search of dragons. Sheer said that lately he had strongly felt the presence of a dragon, and it was strange that none had been found yet. Karen agreed and added that this should be good news, but finding a dragon is not easy. Karen from OT said that she was apologizing too much. The leader intervened and said that it could not be denied that Karen had done her best, and Karen replied that they should be grateful for that. At that moment, they saw the beast quietly approach the tenor and start eating the food. They all realized that it was an earth dragon, and Tenno explained this, that the drying had recently joined them. When Fluffy was flying in the sky and the dragon flew away, Tenno noticed that the dragon could fly without wings. He seemed different, but maybe Fluffy and the dragon were of the same kind. He wondered why he assumed they were of the same kind. The ordinary dog in the house was completely frightened by what was happening before him. Meanwhile, in the castle, the room with the magic stone was heavily damaged. The stones were covered with scratches. The king looked back at the barrier, thinking that everything was fine with it. One of his men said it was impossible, but the mages would find the problem in a month. Four forgot that they were entrusted to guard the blessing of the royal magic stone. The mages thought the king was right. Once the king cast a spell on them that prevented aging when he tested his magic stone, and the chief mage believed that now they were reaping what they had sown. Only the four knew that all the lives sacrificed to the magic stone were used to prolong their own lives and maintain the barrier. Then they believed that power was justice. The mage then said that the world would never forgive them. He left. It was believed that the forest kings trembled and their power was suppressed by the magic stone, which meant that the forest had become a threat to the country. He wondered how many more lives would have to be sacrificed to restore the magic stone, and thought that the country had now brought upon itself the wrath of the whole world. The chiefs, standing in the field near the stone house, looked at the small spiders and noticed that recently the children had begun to change their signs. Their main strategy was to dress in hellfire and defeat the enemy with speed, or at least that was how it was supposed to be. Each time the master saw them, he sent an image of how to manipulate the threads, and the chief asked the children if they had tried it. He realized that instead of just running, they could catch prey by releasing the threads faster, and it seemed their skills had developed so that they already knew how to set traps. The main guest had to try it himself, and he thought their idea was truly brilliant. Tenno called the dragon a flying lizard, but he felt that this name did not fit, and it was so hot that he could not come up with a better idea. Moreover, maybe it was not a lizard at all. Then he remembered Kanako because of the brown color, and since it even resembled a dinosaur, he thought of names like Rex or Terra. He constantly came up with different names, but the dragon did not react, however. But when he called it a flying lizard again, the dragon reacted a little. Next, in the matter of naming, Ten also decided to name the dogs, and named the leader I. The male dogs were renamed Sora and Nu, and the females Amy, Ayu, and Myra. He was proud to have given them such nice names. The colors of the dogs reminded him of indigo, and they all looked quite similar, so he had to be careful not to confuse them. After that, he jumped into the lake to swim and said the water was so cool, but he also felt very hot. The temperature seemed around 40 degrees Celsius, and he thought that in that world it was probably summer. Then he floated on the water and noticed that the river flowing through the forest was beautiful. He was surprised that they had almost built everything up to the river. The fields and gardens were getting bigger and bigger. He raised his eyes to the sky, where two wolves were flying and carrying trees thanks to their magic. Tina understood how they moved the trees and thought that both trees in the walls seemed to be floating, so the world seemed amazing. Ko, tired from the summer heat, said that the seasons of past years seemed to have disappeared. He also believed it was because of the power of their master, Che noted. He felt it for the first time and now understood how strong summer heat could be. In response, they said it was quite hard to endure. He noticed that at this time, the chief looked very lively. Chase said that this was expected from the one called the Keeper of Death. Even the king of the Fenrirs could not withstand such heat. Kogral said he could cool everything with magic, but in reality, after such a long time, he enjoyed the warmth. The chief paid little attention to him and instead said that some bad change was felt. It seemed our master was feeling unwell, and the interlocutor agreed that he thought so too. He began to feel dizzy and thought that he would soon need to get out of the water. Then he suddenly wondered what he was riding on. Looking around, he thought it might be. He was at Amoeba, but she seemed different. Her eyes were small and she did not look angry. In fact, she was pleasant and cool, so he decided that everything was fine. It was then that a man approached and, speaking his language, said that Tenno was playing with water spirits. Pure magical energy attracted the spirits, but even they had never before seen such a large group. The person warned Tino to be careful and not to give them too much mana, and at that moment, Tino suddenly spat something out, because of which the chief doubted whether he was feeling unwell. Ko also came to check, but Tina assured them that he was fine, and when he started cooking, Tina felt well. I cannot believe that the meat and potatoes you cooked this morning disappeared in an instant. Everyone fought for food, and he decided that next time he needed to cook 3 times as much. He would need at least 3 more large pots, maybe even 5. He added that if the one-eyed man also helped the Gauls with cooking, they could have avoided such a fuss. For this, he will need a larger cooking surface and more coal. Gold reserves, the heat was so intense that he could not think clearly, and this. It seemed that the head was spinning. The scene shifted to the castle, where many slaves stood before a group of mages. One of the mages said that there were exactly 100 of them and ordered to send them to the magical warehouse. With such a quantity, they should be able to repair the magic stone. 1 more. For mage, they considered the situation and suggested they assess the progress and increase the required amount. He then reminded the others that these slaves were born with one purpose, to be expendable warriors. Researchers, materials for research, or workers for the simplest jobs. In their country, it was customary, and anyone who even objected was publicly executed. Now no one dares to speak. In fact, many considered it a necessary sacrifice for a prosperous life. Such was the reality of the country they lived in. Meanwhile, Tenno was swimming on the Aimba in the middle of the river and looking at the sun. He said that it seemed there was no temperature, but maybe the heat was keeping him from sleeping. He felt good and it helped him relax. He heard rustling and saw gallums, little ants, and spiders at work. He thought that if he played day after day, his heart would eventually start to burn, and he does so. It was decided not to leave the river and to focus on finding ways to prevent the curse. It was unknown whether human civilization existed at all in that world, but when it came to curses, humans were usually the main culprits, so maybe there were humans somewhere, he thought, although he felt that they were not in a forest. On the contrary, the fact that the world seemed only like a forest convinced him even more that humans must exist. He longed to see them before him, and his thoughts turned to the curse. Meanwhile, the castle slaves were led to the room of the magic stone. Tenham believed that in Japan curses were often directed at a specific person, and although the place could be cursed, he considered this only his theory. Perhaps this place was cursed by earthly spirits. He looked at the lizard and muttered that it could not be so. Somehow the situation began to seem strangely amusing. But the most terrifying thing was that the shadow clung to them. It was believed that Ko and Karon were possessed by it. If found, it had to be immediately cleansed. Possession engulfed Shuri and others under the influence of a treacherous curse. The concept of crime did not exist. Curses themselves are neither good nor bad. The wolves wandered around and together felt a strange sensation. Tenno explained that when someone is possessed, it gradually eats them away. He doubted whether it was more of a curse or something demonic, and whether purification worked on demons. He was no longer sure about that. Demons were summoned through sacrifices, and their power was used to conquer the world, and it resembled a scene from a movie he had seen. The heat was unbearable. He began to feel dizzy, but it did not matter. Both were enemies. He decided to destroy them all. Then he understood it was strangely fun. What magical circles are needed to prevent the summoning of demons? He could not imagine what a magical circle would look like. If it is not a demon, but just a curse, it is better to eliminate its cause, whether it is a person or an object. But if there really were sacrifices, it would be very dangerous. It was necessary to first find a way to deal with it. The scene shifted to the killing of slaves. One of the mages thought that once the technique was activated, everything would be resolved. It remained only to find out the cause and not allow emotions to interfere in such a place. Tenon felt a strange change in his thoughts as he pondered magical circles. Since he knew little about them, it seemed useful to imagine a black stone, but if the criminal died and the victim was placed in the black stone, he was left with a bitter taste in his mouth. He decided to put them to sleep, and at the same time thought that it was best to completely erase their memories of this method. If this were a curse, it would be too difficult to deal with, so he decided to imagine the black stone again, and as before, double the revenge. Then he would seal it so that the curse could never come out again, and as if making it part of the sanctuary. Meanwhile, the mage in the castle, where we read the spell, directs his power into the magic stone. He activated his magic with power and released a burst of energy into the sky. At the same time, the magic stone in the castle began to react and emit energy, causing everyone to retreat and be stunned. The slaves looked around confusedly, and the mages were at a loss for words. Their spells were clearly disrupted. Even the chief mage fell. The chief Mage Biff quickly began to use his power to restore the magic stone. 10 of his thoughts instantly focused as he wondered what the mage was doing. His head suddenly cleared, and he thought that earlier he was confused due to dehydration. He stood up, told himself he would lie down earlier, and suddenly remembered that he could simply use magic to cool the house, and it was strange that he hadn't thought of this before. The scene shifted. Guards were leading the slaves through the forest, and they were among the trees. They were wounded and, having asked for help, reached the kingdom of Antor, a neighboring country of the Enwella Empire, and King Ismelade of Antor suspected that they were runaway slaves from the empire or possibly spies. One of his knights noticed that the slave patches, which were once a symbol of the empire's power, no longer appeared on them. Meliod asked if the knight was certain, and the knight replied that the court magician was currently interrogating the slaves. One of the slaves lay on the bed and explained that they were part of a detachment sent to scout the forest. Slave soldiers could not speak without orders, so they carefully chose their words, but everything seemed distant to them. Suddenly they were illuminated by white light, and they regained consciousness again. At that moment they all escaped. Sanlid asked how long ago it happened. The slaves replied that they had been wandering the forest for about a month. While Ismelio was discussing this matter with the ministers, one of them noticed that strange light had appeared in the forest last month, and another suggested that it might be the work of the empire. Smelly explained that although they shared a border with the Enwella Empire, they managed to repel invasions because the forest was a natural barrier, and someone suggested valuing the forest more. Another person agreed and said that it was not worth delving too deeply into it. Then a man with manners spoke up and suggested investigating further, because the first slave who managed to break the emblem was found, and they could find a clue on how to fight the Enwella Empire, Ismelate commented. Finally, Amigal spoke, and it seemed that he was just looking for an excuse to study magic. Amigal quickly responded, insisting that this was not his intention. Smurducci admitted that this was, nevertheless, a good opportunity. He said they would conduct a long-postponed forest survey because he was curious about what was really happening there. Meanwhile, they were harvesting a grape-like crop in the forest, and Tina noticed that the harvest was good, and he planned to gather the harvest before the heat intensified, so he brought baskets with dolls attached to them and the necessary tools. He said that since he came up with the idea to lower the temperature around the body, he had been feeling much better. The last time he almost got heatstroke, and although he vaguely remembered activating some magic, he could very well have done it. He could not recall the details. His body also seemed strangely light. Ko approached him and he hugged Ko, feeling that since then someone had always been by his side, so he asked the beasts not to crowd around, wondering if they went after the fruit, but he knew they would not get it. It seemed everyone avoided him and said that their master apparently had not changed. The chief said that the magical path was a serious matter. I suppose that Tenno's poor health was due to excessive use of his magic for the barrier and golems, which requires a lot of energy. Suddenly, a huge wave of pure magic arose, and Sheer said he had never seen or heard anything like it before. And now a sudden loss of magical power could kill, and no one ever thought it was possible. Ko approached Tenno closer and felt that his magic seemed to have stabilized. Tenno told him not to do this. Cole looked at the grapes and noticed that now he could make wine, because he realized he had been so focused on the main thing that he hardly thought about such things. When they mentioned wine, he rejoiced and put all the grapes into a large container, adding that he actually prefers beer but does not know how to make it, while wine seems simpler because it only requires barrels. And the Gonsi began to crush the grapes with their feet in a clean vat. Although the work was hard, it was also fun. Then they collected the juice in barrels, and Tenno explained that once he had the juice, he would let it ferment, then pour it into clean jars and take it to the cellar where the temperature is constant. These grapes looked like others, but fermented thanks to the same natural yeasts on the skin. Now he needed to make barrels, and fortunately there was plenty of wood. After 6 months, the process seemed difficult to him because the wood was hard, and he could not bend it easily since he chose a hard type of wood. He tried to make them the same shape, and when he thought he had succeeded, the barrels fell because of a leak. The time has come for a new approach. Tino used to cut trees differently then, and they came up to him, said they had been watching him, and asked what he was doing that day. Tino explained that first the bark must be removed. Shura, eager to try the finished product, said he did not know what Tino was doing but wanted to taste the sweet. Secretly, he did not like sweets. Shura also said that the Gonsi only watched. Ko noticed that this was not like today's food. Karen Curios asked what Tino was doing. Ten-Ohm remembered the great tree that he planned to saw into pieces 1 meter high. He planned to use teleportation magic to turn them into barrels and carve out the middle. He did this every month because the process was very convenient, and now he simply had a machine near the bun. He lined up all the barrels in the basement, thinking that first he needed to expand the space. Next, the action moves to the kingdom of Enwelis, where the king was shouting at the mage and demanding an explanation for why the magical stone could not be fixed. The sage said that they had tried many times, but each time they failed, and the mage who tried to fix it lost all memories and his magic. The king sneered and said that this was a simple matter they had done many times. If there were not enough slaves, they just needed to breed more and try again. The sage noted that if the root cause was not found, it would simply repeat. The king asked what happened to the wizards who tried to fix it. The major replied that all were locked in their rooms. The king ordered them executed, saying he did not need incompetence. The wizard protested in shock that they had served the king faithfully. The king ignored him and ordered the knights to execute them immediately. The night passed and the king sat on the throne, ordering the mage to immediately restore the magic stone. The mage agreed and left the room. The irritated king thought about how useless the barrier of magical stones was and that the cracks could not be repaired. He felt that he was missing something. He cursed the fools who let him down, and despite everything felt fear at the thought of lightning. He wondered what he would do when he found the source of this. He wondered if it could be an attack from another country using the forest as cover, but quickly rejected this thought. No, they are cowards. They did not have the strength to stand against the strongest. His irritation kept growing, so he ordered the knights to entertain him. Soon many slaves were brought before him. The king noted that he had not done this for a long time, and in such times it was better to torture a few slaves. He drew his sword and said that if the mage thinks the king will tire of such matters after centuries, he is mistaken. He is only beginning. Gamers could not believe that he was going to watch the king do it again. Since he joined the knights with hopes and dreams, he was honored to guard the king, but he had never been used to this before. He knew he shouldn't, but he didn't have the power to stop the king, who wielded both the sword and the barrier. After centuries during which that sinister magical sword fed on the lives of its victims, it became the most powerful of all. Players trembled every time the king drew it. The king said with a cruel smile that they would rejoice, for the slaves would soon become one with his sword. The slaves trembled, but no one dared to speak. Suddenly, the king's sword began to glow, and this confused the slaves and even the king himself. The royal sword was attacked with a sword, and the gamers immediately realized that it was a hostile attack. He quickly ordered the knights to protect the king. They rushed forward, but the enemy was nowhere to be seen. The players felt uneasy. It seemed to them that something was wrong. The wizard called the king, who was completely stunned. They continued talking to him, but the king did not understand what they were saying or why he had dropped the sword. Then something touched his body, causing him pain. He demanded that they stop touching him, but when he looked at his hand, he saw that it was bleeding and asked the sage to heal him. The king was sure that he was well protected, and when he remembered his sword, the sage advised him not to get up yet. The king was surprised at what had happened, night game of approach, and convinced him that there were no signs of the enemy. The Timers agreed, still unable to believe that they had managed to wound their king. Then he released the mages and asked for permission to examine the sword. The sorcerer agreed, and when the gamers looked at the blade, he wondered if it was the same sinister magical sword. However, he did not feel any power from it. It was just an ordinary old sword. He noticed a rope wrapped around it and could only describe it as ordinary grass. He was not sure, but it looked like the same material that was wrapped around the magic stone. He thought it was an attack from the forest, similar to the attack on the magic stone, and wondered why they were doing this. They clearly knew little. he realized he would need. To learn more before making a decision, someone spoke up and asked who they were and what they were doing. They wanted something from him. The gamers wondered what it was about. The sage explained that it was a servant who activated the king's sword, and the king had remained like that since he woke up. The players understood that it was the same thing that happened to the mage who tried to fix the stone. Perhaps it happened because they both tried to make a sacrifice, and the premonition he had just felt was connected to this. He looked at the slaves, then at the cracked wall, and thought that maybe the king could still be stopped. The gamers remembered that when he was young, he used to read his grandfather's fairy tales. In one of them there was a description of a forest, where the trees gently swayed in the breeze, and the forest preserved blessings for the people. He remembered that once he was saved by a werebeast when he was traveling there. He envied how in that story it was written that some could even see the kings of the forest. Gamers had also long wanted to see them, but due to the current state of the country, he could not discuss such thoughts with anyone. The action shifted to the present, and Gamel was noticeably irritated. Gamers could understand that something was bothering him. He noticed that meeting gamers, there was a strange coincidence. Gamers noticed that Gamel seemed not to want to be there and looked quite upset. Demel admitted that he hoped to finally have fun in the forest, but he was restrained. He wanted to hunt wild beasts. The man then recalled the incident with the king and warned them to be careful. Gamble accepted the warning and, saying at the end that he wanted to let loose, left. Hammer thought about how to use the situation to his advantage, but first he needed to check something, after which he went to borrow some slaves. When gamers entered the room, he immediately smelled a strange odor, and the man apologized, explaining that the cleaning service had not arrived on time, and remembers how he looked at the slaves and chose a few to his liking. The man asked if the gamers planned to cut them all down, noting that there were almost no slaves left, and they asked the Hammers to leave a few women behind. Hammer refused, explaining that he needed them for a special task and might have to borrow them again. He ordered the man to mark them for further use. The audience. A light breeze soon brought a comfortable season. Ten of Stood looked at the weather and said he was right. He rejoiced when he saw wheat in their fields, which brought him great joy. It was a remote place he noticed when expanding the barrier, and the 1.5-day journey was worth it. When she approached him, Tenno noticed that she was happy too. For a moment, Tina doubted whether the wheat was really as tasty as it seemed. He thought that if Karen were here, she would probably eat it. Shine replied that their master can make any food tasty. Tenno admired the wheat and said that it looks exactly as it should. Maybe it was Wayne who brought the seeds there from somewhere. He tried it, then asked others to hold the tops of the plants, while he himself harvested using magic. Together they harvested the wheat. Everyone continued to help Tenno, and he as well. He was grateful that there were grains in the world. He hoped to use them to prepare something tasty. When he finished, he realized that others were probably worried, so he suggested returning home. Hio, playing, sat down and told Tenno to climb onto his back, because it would be faster that way. Stunned, but he thought it was wonderful. It seemed that being at a height was perfectly normal. Haiwa agreed and Tenno mounted. Haiwa jumped into the sky, propelled by magic. They raced incredibly fast, and Tina was impressed by the speed, feeling both excitement and fear at the same time. When they returned, Ko greeted them, noticed that Tenno had been missing for almost 2 days, and anxiously asked where he had been. Tenno smiled, reassured him, and said he had returned. Hio, sensing Kasa's concern, explained that he had anticipated Kasa's reaction and brought Tenno home as quickly as possible. Ko thanked him, and Tenno wondered how they had returned in just 3 hours, covering a route that usually takes more than a day. Meanwhile, the action shifted to the king. He ordered Gamel that as soon as his night order was ready, they should move to capture the forest and bring to him those who dared to resist him. Gamel gladly replied that he had been waiting for such orders and promised to seize those who opposed the king and bring them to him. He told Gamel to take everything he wanted. Gamel, in turn, asked for several wizards and slaves. The king asked if there was any plan in the game, to which Gamma replied that he would take as much as he needed. When Gamma left the room, the king thought he should have asked Gamma to leave earlier. He said that the 5th commander would perform their duties. At that moment night fell, and he apologized while submitting a report from the slave manager. He was offered to speak and asked what it was about, although he looked indifferent. The knight explained that some slaves showed unusual changes in behavior, and the king asked if there were any problems with the crests. But the knight showed that there was no mention of crests in the report. Deep in thought, the king ordered to kill and replace all slaves with these changes, as he was too impatient to see whom Gamble would bring with him. Meanwhile, the scene shifted to Tenno, who was carrying a full basket of fruits. He said that yesterday was hard, but flying in the sky was wonderful, and added that he would gladly try again, but more slowly. As he walked, he noticed fallen trees and thought that they had already started to rot. At first, he thought it was just his imagination, but things decomposed much faster than in Japan. Usually compost became ready in about a month, but here it would probably be ready in only 2 weeks, Then he noticed that one pile was composted with magic, and the other was left to decompose naturally, and it was clear that the naturally decomposed pile had a better color and smell. He watched as the gallons carried away the fruits, and said that he also checked the compost on the vegetables. Those grown with natural compost were noticeably better in color. The texture and density of the steam were noticeably different. He realized that they would not have to worry about food if the compost worked properly. He once believed that magic was omnipotent, but when it came to vegetables and compost, microbes played a key role, and he began to doubt whether magic affects living organisms. This meant that natural fermentation might be better suited for preparing the dish fish toss and wine, so he decided to check the wine as soon as possible. At the thought of wine, he rejoiced, and almost to his surprise felt a slight tremor in his hands. He doubted himself aloud and shook his head. 10 of them began to prepare. Combination of food. He decided to cook meat in 2 ways, on charcoal and using magic, compared them, and also tried vegetables grown with magic. After the tests, he realized that the best results come from using almost no magic in growing and cooking vegetables, because when there is too much magic, the texture becomes spongy and the taste worsens. He had a lot of time, so he decided to slowly grow vegetables and cook them the old way. He ate and told himself that he would rest that day and process the wheat. Then he began thrashing the wheat, which had dried well in the wind. It was very fun and easy. The next day, he set aside the proceeds for their next harvest and care. Carefully remove large, unnecessary pieces. The gallons helped him, and he thanked them for their help. Then he had to rub the wheat between 2 boards to remove the husks. He thought that cutting grooves in the boards would be easier, but even though they tried, they didn't finish after 3 hours of work. The sight of the work of the galley reminded them that they still needed to get rid of the chaff, so they dropped the wheat from a height so the wind would carry it away. However, part of the chaff did not separate, so he thought it was worth strengthening the wind. He did this, everything mixed again. He apologized to Gons for the mistake and tried. Again, Tenno said that it took quite a lot of time, but now the wheat needed to be carefully dried before grinding. He decided to do this in the living room where no one would disturb. He asked the Galloni to watch over it so the squirrels wouldn't eat it. Just then Kuro appeared and asked if he could eat the wheat. Tenno replied that it was not allowed yet. Kuro, intervening, told Kuro not to cause problems for their master. Kuro, interested, asked if Ko had thought about what their master spent all his time on. Covert replied that it was probably grain grown by humans, and he had never eaten it before. He was sure that their master would eventually share it with them, so they should not humiliate themselves so much. The Galloni listened carefully and continued, saying that their master was preparing food they could not imagine, and recalled a snake dish prepared by Tenno, which made Tenno feel the weight of the Galloni's watchful eyes. Under pressure, Tenno lay down to look at the grains, and thought that as soon as the flour was ready, the first thing he needed to do was bake bread. To bake bread, he would need yeast, and he thought he would have to make it himself. He remembered his sister, who was very passionate about baking bread and used to make him make yeast for her, so he decided to think about it after the flour was ready. He recalled that he did not have proper baking equipment, and suddenly said that in the kitchen he only had a stove. He would have to make a pizza oven from his wooden terrace. Fortunately, after excavating the wine cellar, he had a lot of stones left. Put a layer of golden metal to insulate the wooden decking and foundation. It turned out to be incredibly strong. The dog was shocked watching how his Tenno so effortlessly used the chalcum. Tino explained that they needed to make the foundation lower than the decking and give it a shape like the one he had seen on television. After great effort, you finally built it. He cooks food in the oven and wonders if he can enhance its flavor using hot coals. He grilled it, gave out portions to everyone, and when he ate himself, he considered it very tasty. It was also noted that the meat now looks even more appetizing, and its texture changed only due to a different cooking method. Karen said it is chewy and slightly bitter, but it reminded her of the favorite grilling technique on the lava of her comrades. Ten with a smile, satisfied with the results. He accomplished a lot that day, so after dinner he decided to go to bed immediately. It was then that Sherry came in and reported that the little ones who went out with the master had returned and brought prey. It turned out to be an evil snake, and they wanted Tenno to cook it. When everyone looked at him, Tenno felt both surprise and curiosity at the same time. The scene shifted to the castle, where Miss Lost was watching as people prepared to depart. He noticed that they were taking many wizards and slaves with them. They are all determined to fulfill the king's wish. This miracle was lost due to noisy weather involving the fifth commander, the quartet. The forest really could have fallen. However, the Gamers denied that it was possible. He thought that from that event, he had 10 days to prepare and regretted that he could not save more slaves. When they were leaving the castle, Gamel loudly remarked that with such a large caravan, it would take half a month to reach the forest, not until Saturday. The man explained that they would carry less on the way back, so they would arrive faster. It is recorded they agreed to do it before winter. The scene shifted to Tenno, who gathered wheat into a small bag. Using magic, he turned the wheat into flour, planning to craft a millstone when he had time. The flour was a bit dark, but he hoped it would still be usable. That day he decided to make a sourdough starter. First, he washed the bottle in 2 spoons, then mixed everything with water. 1 spoon of flour stirred in water. He covered it with a cloth lid and left it to stand at room temperature. It was warm enough now, so it should turn out well. After a day, he stirred in 2 more spoons of flour with water, and waited another day. To his joy, it started bubbling and everything was going smoothly. Now he only had to periodically add flour and water and monitor the sourdough starter in the refrigerator. Fermentation in this world went faster, so he decided to do everything gradually. Looking at the gallons, he realized he had measured the ingredients incorrectly, so he decided to make scales. He planned to create 2 identical stones, which he would use as weights. He divided one exactly in half, then divided each half into quarters, and now could measure the ingredients precisely. The starter seemed ready, so it was time to bake the bread. 10 of us decided to use freshly ground flour for this batch. Mixed 1 part water in starter with 2 parts flour, added 1 part sugar per 10 parts water, and a pinch of salt. He kept working, thinking to himself, and if he remembered correctly, this was the right balance. He mixed sugar with warm water, then added the starter. Fermentation had already begun, and now he needed to add flour and salt and knead the dough. Tina thought he was doing everything right and stirred until everything came together. While working, he noticed the dough looked good. Next was to continue kneading it, because he knew this was the most important part of the process. He glanced at the gulms and wondered what they were doing while continuing to knead. Dogs and wolves looked at him with curiosity. Tino explained that he was baking to make tasty bread. After finishing kneading, he was exhausted but satisfied. He then ordered the gallons to stop for a minute because they needed to cover the dough with a damp cloth and let it rise. While the dough rested, Ten decided to step away to gather fruit. He said that when the dough doubled in size, it would need to be kneaded again, then allowed to rise a second time before shaping for baking, and when he returned, he showed the fruit to the gallons and asked if they could eat it. After work, he checked the dough, divided it into equal parts, and put them in the oven to bake. The animals watched closely and noticed that they were curious about what Tenno had been doing the last few days. An unusual delicious smell appeared in the air, which he had never smelled before. Shuri loudly guessed that it might be coming from the grain the little ones went to gather, and Shiv said he couldn't even guess what it could be. At 10 o'clock, he looked at the oven and noticed that 10 minutes had passed, so it should be ready. He took out the bread, tasted it, and felt that the crust was crunchy, and inside it was soft and elastic, just as it should be in real bread. Karen bit off his piece and said it was incredible, admitting that he never knew something could be so tasty. Someone added that Karen really loves seeds in bread. Another disagreed and said it was simply good, just as it should be from their master. Ko suggested that maybe the chief should reconsider his opinion about human wisdom, but he disagreed and said that Tenno was amazing simply because of who he was, and Tenno quietly smiled, feeling as if the animals were enjoying the bread. He thought that if he had cheese and butter, he could make pizza, and also wanted to try pancakes made only from water, flour, and jam, while eggs and milk would be perfect. He looked at the Gulms, who silently placed more bread in front of him. Tenno wondered what they had been doing. They left without saying a word, simply quietly leaving him alone with his thoughts. The next morning, Tina woke up from the coolness, although it was still only autumn. That morning he found fresh bread and, tasting it, he was surprised that it was fluffier and tastier than what he had made himself. Ten-O went outside and felt a sudden cold in the air. It seemed the weather was fluctuating between extremes. He told the Gongs that he hadn't seen the boss lately and suggested that they had gone underground to hibernate like Shuri and the ants. He decided to take care of household chores that needed to be done. Looking at the gallons, he wondered if they were still carrying wheat, because then he could grind it. He was surprised to notice that the wheat had already been processed with magic. The starter supplies were running low, but there were still a few jars of fish sauce and even more sugar. He thanked the gongs for making salt and oil. He considered the possibility of making stone trinkets. As he thought about this, one of the gallons approached to start working. Tino insisted that everything was fine and that he could handle the first batch himself. Still, the gallant took the task from him, and Tenno, seeing no point in resisting greed. Since he had nothing else to do, he decided to do a major kitchen renovation he had long planned, expanding it beyond the mountain, tripling the area. He even installed a new stove, built a whole stone wall for barbecue, and set up a pizza oven. He thought that very soon he would be able to wash many vegetables at once. When everything was ready, he prepared food and gave it to the golems. It seemed that the exhausting struggle had finally ended. He looked at Shura and the chief, and could not understand why they did not go into hibernation. They said nothing and left with the babies, and Tenno thought that they had just gone out to eat fried food. Goldem approached Tenno, showed him how many barrels they had, and then handed over a wooden mug filled with wine. Tenno noted that it was already done, and added that the wine would mature quickly. He noticed that it smelled pleasant, and had a slightly dry, sweetish taste. But it was very good. Drinking alone might seem a bit lonely, but he drank it at night. Suddenly he noticed that 3 wolves from the fight were arguing about who was the strongest. He was stunned and did not understand what had just happened. And just as Tenno tried to stop them, Chi also joined the fight and claimed that he was the strongest. Then he wondered what was going on and realized that Guln was pouring wine for everyone. And Tenno could do nothing, only watch. The chief told Shura that they would decide everything now, to which Shura replied that he never loses to the chief. The tenant noticed that magic was not applied to the question of whether they should not be in hibernation. It was then that he noticed someone had fallen into the river and realized that now he would not be able to drink peacefully. According to him, Karen was very drunk, and he saw that her head ended up in a barrel after she fell. She was grateful that Fluffy and the last lizard were still in Warmo. Ko approached and asked for more, saying that it was amazing and that he felt very good, so he asked Ten to open another barrel. Tino was shocked and quickly refused, believing that he had done everything possible to explain to them that wine should only be drunk once a week. Then he put on his jacket to go outside and noticed that it was unusually cold, although less than half a month had passed since the beginning of autumn. Gamble and his team stopped near the forest because they saw snow ahead and did not know what was happening. They went to the town closest to the forest, Tartarus, where it was snowing so heavily that Gamble said, "These mages were talking nonsense, and the man was afraid that Gamble would punish them." He warned the mage and told Gamble not to think about going into the forest in such weather, because even with a magic circle, they would spend all their magic to melt the snow in such a heavy snowfall. Gamble stopped the reminders, saying that if it were only about them, it would not have stopped them. The man said that the mages were right, because they had never seen such heavy snow before. They were lucky to be able to return to Tartarus. The lord of the city was Marcus, who won the tournament and was there by the king's order. Gamble suggested that they would just spend the winter there and regain their strength. They were preparing to put the slaves and animals they rode on into storage, and Gamble ordered one man to make sure the slaves were well fed and did not die. The scene shifts to Tenno. He was cold, admiring the snakes, and then saw Karen engulfed in flames flying and was shocked. Karen came closer and asked if he was cold. He hugged her and asked if he had been in the fire, and no. He noticed that only a day had passed, but a lot of snow had already accumulated, which he had never seen in Japan. Dogs and wolves were playing in the snow, and Tenno, watching them, noticed they looked lively, and although there was a fence between them, he felt cold just looking at them. They liked playing in the snow so much that they joined the race. Ko said that the Herms seemed to have settled well, and Chi agreed, adding that it was all thanks to their master. Cool added that their master's magic really calmed him, and although earlier during the fierce battle with Churani and Foamy, he would have been ready to fight, strangely, now he did not want to. Chase said that all this was thanks to the power of their master, so he could communicate with them and was sincerely grateful to him. At that moment, Tino petted Ko and asked if he liked being petted. Ko felt that she was very pleasant and decided that his winter jacket was the best. Instead, Chi did not get such pleasure. When he called Ko, Ko wondered if Chi had something to say, so he just let him speak. Chai approached Tino, who looked puzzled, while Chai stared intently at him. Ko pretended that he wanted more pets, and his Tino continued. Chase slowly tilted his head toward Tino's hand, looking a little sad. The 10 guessed whether Chi also wanted to be petted. Ko told Chain asked not to disturb the owner. The head replied that this was not what he meant. Tino looked at Chi and said that he was very cute, and Chi insisted that this was not what he wanted to say. Then Ko left went to patrol, and Chi followed him. Ko told him that even his students could envy the master. Chi was shocked and thought that although he was almost equal to Fenrir in strength, the order had not changed at all. Atha was not so foolish as to not notice when he was loved. Choi, on the other hand, believed that Ko probably would not understand how he really felt if he did not say it out loud. But that was one of Ko's pleasant traits. Then Ko joked that Chi could straighten him out when he returned. They both moved on. Tenno wished Chi luck, but he could not shake the thought that Chi might remain only a friend, especially because they were from different species. That day started calmly, but that day there was also a drinking party. Tenno watched as the wolf trained with Shuri and wondered if wolves took breaks from hybridization. It seemed these clashes had already become their routine. He warned them not to get hurt. At first he was worried he might drink too much, but eventually decided to relax and enjoy, took a piece of food, and said he had a reserve of courage and a glass of dry wine that fit perfectly. He noticed that Fluffy and the flying lizard behaved normally. Even while they were sipping wine, he was surprised to see a snowman who somehow saved Fluffy. It was so cute that he couldn't stop wondering how it was made. When he touched it, he wondered if it was a marshmallow. He didn't know where it came from, or if it was really one of Fluffy's friends. Then 3 of them flew into the sky, leaving the wolves amazed. Tino's heart was filled with such beauty. As soon as Tino woke up, he thought that maybe he had a strange dream. Soon he realized it was not a dream because there really was a marshmallow in front of him. Thinking it might be one of them, he decided to name it. At first he suggested Paul de Fluffy, and if he didn't like it, then White as well. There was no reaction, and he still felt the same. He barely remembered that he said something last night. Then he asked if he liked the name Marshmallows. Then he jumped into the snow and noticed an amoeba in the water. Somehow they gave a different feeling, which he attributed to the snow he wanted. If there was a difference in magical power between them. Those from the water had magical power similar to Fluffy, and it was the same with all whose powers were similar to Fluffy. He was informed that this was not just an increase in quantity, but a completely new species that arose because of the cold. Karen was still sleepy and said that he did not believe he had overslept because the drink was so tasty. He said it was time to change the approach and look for the dragon that day. It was then that he noticed a dragon lizard in the sky. Ko, looking at Karen, said that he had finally woken up. Karen was shocked to see that the ice spirits had also returned. Ko explained that the cooling had happened because the ice dragon had restored its power. Karen then asked if that meant only 2 dragons remained. Chi wondered if all the dragons would gather together. Ko agreed and explained that when that happens, the forest will finally recover. He added that dragons naturally gravitate toward the power of their master, implying that Karen was futile. Karen asked for silence, insisting that he was not only searching for dragons, but also engaged in other tasks necessary for the restoration of the forest. Things on which the color and existence of the heart of the forest depended. Tenno, looking at them, noticed that they had already become friends, and it seemed that now everything would be fine. When he was sleeping, Chief picked him up and took him away from there. He thought that he was being suddenly kidnapped, and it was a little scary. Anna wondered if Shuri and the others had already come out of hibernation. He thought he would be an obedient boy. He looked around, wondering if this was Shuri's new nest, and saw it. They were touching the block there, and probably wanted to lay some blocks along the wall. He helped them make a path, and then noticed that the spiders came with the snow, and decided to teleport the blocks, saying, "It would be faster, and it is better for him to make a storage with a freezer, otherwise the snow spiders will melt." He watched as Amoeba and Fluffy played, and thought it was worth fixing something for the snow creatures in case the snow melted. He wondered if they cared about the roots and when spring would come. Brinkane suggested they clear that side of the river. When Shuri and the chief clapped for him, he wondered when they learned to cheer like that. Eventually the 10th season came to an end, and inside the doll, the remnants of snow were carefully cleaned, while the wolves successfully hunted to then return the prey to their lair. Tenno thanked them for their efforts and suggested that some of them might have hunted recently. The action shifts to Hammers, where a man approached him and asked if he had heard any rumors. Hammers was reviewing papers and inquired about the nature of these rumors. The man whispered that there was a rumor that if they mistreated the slaves, a curse would fall upon them and the forest would punish them, and the rumor itself was very foolish. He then asked Gamers if he also thought so, or if he believed that those beasts were capable of such things. Gamers replied by asking if the man would dare say that in front of the king. Hearing this, the man hesitated, and Gamers said that it was disrespectful. The man quickly explained that he did not intend that. Gamers responded that he was just joking and knew well how loyal that man was to the king. The man agreed but asked Gamers not to intimidate him like that, as he was a lieutenant and deserved support. Another person present noted that Gamers' remark was inappropriate. As they were leaving, Gamers thought that the man was loyal to the king, so he must not find out. Meanwhile, the slave told the others that edible plants could be found there. He showed them an image of a dangerous snake, warned that it could jump up to twice its body length, and that their lives depended on remembering this. Tenno was chopping wood to make logs, and the Gonsi were carrying them to build a fence around their garden. Ten Oppas recalling that this needed to be done soon, and the work was going quickly, and he guessed that everyone wanted to work because there was almost nothing to do during the long winter. Everyone kept working and thought that spring had inspired everyone so much that he almost had nothing left to do. Lately it seemed that only about half of them went hunting, and he looked fine every time he saw him. Just then a wolf approached, and Tenno began to pet it. Then he saw her and noticed that quite some time had passed since he last saw her. He looked. He had a strange feeling in his stomach and wondered if she was pregnant, but it was spring, so he decided it was natural. And so it was. He felt a little lonely and almost forgot that he really needed to look for the edge of the forest. He was worried that because of all these little ones, they might not have enough food, so he was a bit concerned. He checked the food supplies and thought that this might be all they had left. Thanks to the supplies in the pantry, they managed to get everyone through the winter. I think they should consider expanding the field. And then looked at the captivated faces of the runners. A few days later, he saw the offspring of various wolves, squirrels, and similar animals. He was glad that in those few days they had several successful births and he liked the baby, but the offspring Ko looked almost like the parents, and the thought that Ko was now a mother still surprised him. He looked at Chai and said that he had managed to cross racial boundaries, and he appreciated it. Then he went into the forest, noticed how beautiful it was there, and said that he must do everything possible for their growing family. The agricultural brigade worked diligently on the new fields, so he decided to expand the granary. Although he was a little surprised that about half of the new fields seemed strange. He touched the walls to use his magic on them and then helped the golems. Then, while he was resting, another new creature appeared. And it was wonderful. Tino recognized it as a phasmatodia, the largest insect in the world, and it was undoubtedly about 10 times larger than any he had seen before. It was then that Karen came and said that she had managed to find them. This undoubtedly proved her value to Tenno. Tenno wondered why she was so proud, and lately it seemed to him that they often stuck out their chests. She survived and said that those creatures were in a trance and were tree spirits. Karen agreed and said that the spirits of the trees had returned, so probably the world tree had also been reborn. 10A wondered what was happening, because everyone seemed to be gathering together. The new creature gestured for Tenno to go outside, and Tenno wondered why it wanted to go there. He approached and explained that he came here because he felt some strange magic. And it seemed that magic was calling Tenno. He wanted to find out what it was because he truly felt some mysterious magical power. They all headed in that direction, and the tenant noticed that the strange feeling was intensifying. They approached. Stopped in front of some gigantic tree, and Tina was surprised to see it. Shura could not believe it. In his whole life, he had never seen such a tree before. They confidently stated that the heart of that forest is governed by the world tree. Karen said that she heard it is supposedly protected by several barriers, and only the chosen ones can approach it. The chief added that he used to feel its presence throughout the forest. Tenno, looking closer, said that it seemed to be withering. Ko explained that he had long protected the forest from human attacks and is now losing strength. Shuri Grid hoped that their teacher's magic could restore it. Henel looked at the mantis-like creatures and felt as if they were waiting for him to do something. He felt magical energy being drawn from him and decided to just keep giving it away. At that moment, the leaves began to detach and fall to the ground. Tenno and the others were surprise, uncertainty whether it was supposed to happen. Another creature looked unwell, and Tina did not know what to do. Ko told Tina that he needed to come up with a plan, and Karen agreed. Many clues led to the next episode. They fell, and when his foot touched one of them, it began to glow. He did not know what was happening. He found nothing there. But then he saw a small creature near him, resembling a tree. When Tenno was leaving, he noticed that the creature was following them. He thought it was a monster made of wood, because everyone else was acting strangely too. Karen suggested that their master's magic was mixing with the magic of the tree, and Shari said it was the tree of the world. Then I was asked by Ko if that thing was safe, and when Ko nodded in agreement, Tenno agreed, wondering where he was. He could leave everything as it was, because creating a new clearing would interfere with Marshmallow's basement room. When they were returning home, all the new creatures seemed happy to dive into Fluffy Lake. It seemed she liked it, and the small tree creature stuck its roots into the ground near the lake and quickly grew, surprising Tenno. He noticed that it was amazing and wondered if this was exactly how trees in the world turned into oil. He was a little scared too, but they made a new friend. The scene shifts to Jembel and his team, where they were fiercely fighting monsters and exterminating them. Jembel slayed a dragon and said that the hunt was very boring. He did not expect to need to use only half of their subordinates. He knew that cruelty was the only dignity of these beasts. They were now setting up a magic circle to break the barrier around the forest, and someone warned that the barrier had several layers, so they needed to hurry. Gamble said that the time was almost here, and soon they would show those scoundrels in the forest the power of the mightiest emperor. Someone asks how to cook the forest lord when he appears, and another says that it is a beast, so they need to spend and take him to the king. Gamble thinks that now the truth about his disability would be fearless and unlike other claims. They were royal knights, but all cowards. To some, the forest seems different, but this should not become a problem. He wonders what scared the Fourth Order of Knights so much and whether they were even real knights. He would have beaten them if they had not stopped him. Some man asked him not to go, saying "Sockbot," and it reminded him of what he was like. He was told that the mages asked why the composition of their forces was so strange. Gamel says that those incompetent ones need to think about it a little. And all attacks were aimed at the ancient magic stone in the castle. Even when the stone broke the royal sword, it probably drew power from the stones, But the forest attacks were directed at the stones, so they just needed not to use them, because there were many other offensive spells in reserve. He did not manage to bring any high-ranking mage, and the day could bring sacrifices to increase their power. He asked everyone to just listen. They were going to break through the barrier around the forest with those two magical circles, and then set it on fire so that everything they saw would burn well. They all agreed to do it. Gamble said there are obstacles in the forest to keep the beast from escaping, and they need to burn it from the outside, gradually moving inward. Someone asked him to also leave some for them. Gamble appreciated their enthusiasm and said not to worry, because they would have many more chances to prove themselves. He noticed that another donkey had come and learned from his mistake. Now all the slaves were up to 5 years old, and the trash that was not taught to fight would simply die. They would become prey in the forest if something went wrong and they escaped. He looked at the cage and thought that the medicine seemed to be working. Maybe they are worth nothing, but it was an honor for me to serve the king. The scene shifts to Tenno, where he was watching the Kidwold playing with magic. Tenement noticed that they were growing so fast, although they were only a week old, and they were already playing dangerously. He thought that everything would be fine as long as their mother was watching over them. Usually has a lot of free time and wonders if more amoebas have come to the field. He makes rounds every day to check how his companions are feeling. He was definitely not just having fun, he was dozing. Those new creatures led him to the tree, and he said that it was, as always, magnificent. He still did not understand what those stick insects wanted to tell him, but if he did not visit them for at least a day, they would come for him with a sad look. He said that he saw the tree growing right before his eyes, and that everything in the world grows so fast. It was another quiet day for him, and maybe it was worth going to look for leaves for tea. The scene shifts to a magic circle created by the Gamble team, where mages are casting spells, and slaves are sitting in their places. The man tells Gamma that it is almost time, and he does not know if they will resist. Gamma replied that he will kill anyone who stands against the king. Now let's see what was supposed to happen. On the other hand, 10 films something strange, and he says he has a bad feeling. At that moment, six-legged stick insects run up to him, which surprises him, and he suspects that it is not yet time for this, and as if something happened to him. The tree, he wondered if the magic was in chaos, and if the healing would work. He thought it would help a little, but it was only temporary relief. Cocaine asked if it was some kind of attack on them. Tenon understood that even Cole was worried, but he saw it for the first time, so he did not know what it meant. Died again, and this could mean the end of the forest. He doubted whether it would take root in a bad place, but it chose the place itself. Tenno heard that fungus in unsuitable soil could damage a tree, but he was not an expert and would just fix everything. Considering it as an external attack, he would simply use his magic to maximize the tree's immunity. There could also be pests in the roots, so he would strengthen its protection. When he used his power, his comrades were shocked, and Ko said that the world tree was enveloped in the magic of their master. Now Tenno had to find the source of the problems and prevent them. Pests and fungi spread through the soil, so he needed to inspect a large area to find their source and use a filter to check a wide zone. Looking at the leaves, it seemed to work, and the tree's strength stabilized. Other trees could also have been affected, so they needed treatment. But he rejected this plan and decided to eliminate the root of the problem by isolating everything that tree creatures would consider enemies. The scene shifted to the castle, where Gamer sat rereading papers, thinking that new investigation requests from surrounding villages would soon arrive, because the mysterious light that crossed the sky for several days in a row naturally caused concern. Although he had no solid evidence that these cases were connected, he was sure that the phenomenon affected the magical stones. It was then that a man entered the room, looking intently for a long time and filled with desire. He asked Gamers if he had heard the news. Gamer replied that if you mean the fifth one who reached the forest, then yes, I heard about it. Mislos commented that news spreads quickly. The man had it. The forest is now destroyed. But the players did not look satisfied. That's the problem, he said. Even the fourth managed to get that far when they invaded the forest. Mislos indicated that after that they were attacked. The Gamers responded, although they were struck by that light, and asked if there were any wounded or dead. Only Slate managed to escape. Lady Loss was about to say something. The Gamers continued, and this was probably a warning. And this is a luxury that only the truly strong can afford. Tell me, in your opinion, what comes after the warning. Boy guessed an attack. The players nodded. You should watch the timing carefully. The fifth invasion might give the forest a reason to respond to that country. The man clenched his fists and coldly said he would burn everything down. The scene shifts to Tenno, where he thought that if the forest is hidden, it kills anyone who comes too close, and he was studying the side effects of the target to understand what was wrong. He turned any insect or any mushroom to ashes and burned them all. Gamble said that the attack was approaching. The devils outsmarted them, so they had to show them what awaited them. The man said he would kill them all. When they arrived, they did not know where the slaves were. Suddenly a bright light appeared, and they saw nothing. They were able to see again. They discovered that the mages were burning. Then Gamble summoned water to stop it. But since it did not work, Gamble asked the one who could cast spells to simply extinguish the fire. Even when they tried to do it, nothing worked, and the fire only intensified. The game will ask others to retreat, and then the entire magic circle burned down. The slaves were still in the prison wagon near the fire. He moved to Tenno, where he noticed that the tree looked happier. He wondered what else could be done, and whether the injection had already entered her system. Maybe the rest could be used as fertilizer. He conducted an internal investigation, crushed and absorbed the target. The scene shifts to Gamma. He heard something and wondered what it was. Then the man explained that it was a magic circle for removing barriers. So Gamble told them to approach carefully. As they moved forward, the ground began to blacken. Gamma doubted if it was a joke and was stunned to see all this. The scene shifts to Tenno, who is looking at a growing tree and leaning back completely relaxed. He said that the magical power had stabilized, so he thought everything was fine now, although his heart was still beating. For the first time he was so scared, so that they would not touch his friends. On the other hand, Gamble's team lost there, and everyone felt completely different. Gamma looked around and did not understand what was happening. It was unthinkable. Slaves were also coming from there. The scene shifts to the mage, who was reading papers and reports, and learned that the fifth unit managed to infiltrate the forest. There were many mages with them now, so they would probably return safe and sound. The sorcerer, reviewing all the records, found nothing about how to strengthen the magic stone except sacrifices, because it was primarily about magic created by blood. He read that to unite the magic stone, 700 lives were needed, about 100 more lives for visual magic, and approximately 7,000 lives over 100 years. The more he read about it, the more futile it seemed. The players in the room with Mislost and another man said that the man was shown that the forest completely considered them enemies, and this was regarded as an invasion. But he thought it was already too late. Then the man was about to say something, but suddenly everyone felt pressure and fell to the ground. And even everyone else in the castle felt the same. Hammer said it seemed as if someone was squeezing him, and if this continues, he might die, but for now he cannot afford that. The one who read the records felt the same and thought he did not want to die. He believed that 200 slaves were not enough to strengthen the magic stone, and the pace needed to be increased to compensate for this. Having reviewed the documents he submitted, he could not understand why helper animals were not used to get more. He also heard that there are sleepers who cry even after their emotions have been muted, and this interested him and made him think about forgiveness. Gunners tried to get up and thought about 2 others. He saw that Miss Lost was fine, and the other man was wounded but still breathing. The anger of the king of the world went beyond the forest. Sage coughed, thought the cough had passed, and then pondered about others. Dadarcy were alive, and the one who read the report pondered that pure rage. They thought they might have incurred someone's anger. He thought the world would not forgive them. The sage went to inform others that something had happened to the king and to call them for help. And then he asked to execute the invaders. Another sage believed that, apart from the trusted daughter and granddaughter of the king, anyone who entered his bedroom was unusual. Not that the king necessarily trusted them. They entered, and the sage said that he had brought that person. The king cried out in pain, said he heard, and asked them to heal him quickly. His hand was cut off. He cried and spoke about his previous body, wondering how it happened. The mages asked another person to heal their king. That person agreed and began healing the king's hand. They considered that it was not theirs, and it was almost like drawing water with a sieve, so they barely made progress. The king's body was supposed to be the strongest, but something changed, and all they could do was somehow cover the wound. After that, the healer left and told the one who was closing the doors that if the magic stone had been in perfect order, this would not have happened. The second person did not understand why they could not find a way to fix the same magic stone. The scene shifts to the forest, where everything was completely fine. When the puppies were playing, Tenno noticed that they almost immediately grew to the size of ordinary dogs. Then he paid attention to the tree spirits, stick insects, and the eco tree. He thought he named the tree Eco because it somehow differed from the others. Since then, a month and a half had passed, and now the dream looked much better. He wondered what caused this sharp growth spurt. Looking at the forest, he noted that everything had clearly changed. He did not quite know if they would call it mana, but he felt all the individual sources of mana and the forest itself much more clearly than before. Since Ecos had recovered, it seemed that something was gradually changing. But since everyone was quite satisfied with this, he decided that the forest had changed.